Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. If you're looking for some stories to help you relax, clear your mind, or just fall asleep to, you're in exactly the right place. Tonight, I've got a collection of some absolutely wild stories from Reddit about relationships, family drama, and situations that honestly make you wonder how people function in the real world. I'm talking about cheating partners, boundary-crossing relatives, and people who seem to have completely lost touch with basic human decency. Before we dive in, just get comfortable, grab whatever you need to relax, and let's explore some stories that'll probably make you feel better about your own life. These are the kinds of stories where you'll find yourself thinking, there's no way this is real, but unfortunately, it absolutely is. So let's get into it. Story 1. The Cheating Sister. Our first story tonight comes from someone who discovered that betrayal can come from the people you trust the most. He cheated on me with my sister, and my family expects me to just get over it because they're getting married now. So I need to get this off my chest, because I feel like I'm losing my mind. My boyfriend of 4 years cheated on me with my younger sister, and now my entire family is acting like I'm the problem for not being supportive of their relationship. I honestly don't even know where to start with this whole mess, but I'll try to explain everything from the beginning. I started dating my boyfriend, let's call him Marcus, when I was 23 and he was 25. We met through mutual friends and hit it off immediately. He was charming, funny, ambitious, and we just clicked in a way I'd never experienced before. My family loved him from the start. My parents would invite him to every family dinner. My dad would take him to watch sports. And my sister, who was 19 at the time, thought he was the coolest guy ever. She'd always try to hang out with us, which I thought was sweet. She looked up to me and wanted to be included in my life. Over the next few years, Marcus became basically a part of our family. He'd come to every holiday, every birthday party, every family gathering. My mom would even call him directly to invite him to things instead of going through me. My sister had moved back home after her first year of college because she wanted to save money, so she was around a lot. She and Marcus developed this friendly relationship where they'd joke around and tease each other. I never thought anything of it, because why would I? She was my little sister, and he was my boyfriend. The idea that anything inappropriate could happen between them literally never crossed my mind. About 8 months ago, I started noticing some weird things. Marcus would be on his phone constantly, and would angle it away from me when I was nearby. He started working late more often, and would sometimes not respond to my texts for hours, when he used to always reply pretty quickly. My sister was also being strange. She'd gotten really distant with me, and would leave the room whenever I came over to my parents' house. She stopped wanting to hang out or talk about her life. When I'd ask her what was wrong, she'd just say she was stressed about school and work. I brought up my concerns to Marcus a few times, asking if everything was okay between us. He'd always reassure me that everything was fine, and that he was just busy with a big project at work. He'd make plans with me, talk about our future together, and even mentioned looking at engagement rings. So I convinced myself I was just being paranoid and insecure. Then one night, about 6 months ago, I decided to surprise Marcus at his apartment with dinner. I had a key to his place, so I let myself in. When I walked into his bedroom, I found him in bed with my sister. Not just like they were hanging out, they were actively in the middle of having sex. I literally walked in on them. My sister screamed, and Marcus jumped up and started trying to put his clothes on while stammering about how he could explain. I just stood there in complete shock. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. This was my boyfriend of 4 years and my 23-year-old sister, the two people I trusted most in the world besides my parents. I remember my sister pulling the sheets around herself and crying, saying, "I'm so sorry," over and over. Marcus was trying to approach me and explain, but I couldn't hear anything he was saying over the ringing in my ears. I just turned around and left. I got in my car and drove to my best friend's house and completely broke down. The next few days were a complete blur. Marcus called and texted constantly, begging to talk to me and explain. My sister showed up at my apartment crying and trying to apologize. I refused to see either of them. I was devastated, humiliated, angry, and heartbroken all at once. My parents called me and said they needed to talk about what happened. I thought they were calling to support me, but instead, they wanted to mediate a conversation between me, Marcus, and my sister. When I went to their house, my parents sat me down and told me that Marcus and my sister had confessed that they'd fallen in love. They said it had started about 5 months earlier, and they'd been trying to fight their feelings, but couldn't help it. My sister was crying and saying she never meant to hurt me and that she felt terrible. Marcus was saying that he never planned for this to happen and that he did love me, but what he felt for my sister was different and stronger. I was waiting for my parents to tell them both how messed up this was. I was waiting for my dad to kick Marcus out and tell him to never contact our family again. I was waiting for my mom to tell my sister that what she did was a betrayal that could never be undone. Instead, my mom said that while the situation was unfortunate and painful, we couldn't help who we fell in love with. She said that Marcus and my sister seemed genuinely in love and that with time, maybe our family could heal from this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked at my dad, and he just nodded and said that he understood I was hurt, but that holding on to anger wouldn't help anyone. He said that my sister was young and made a mistake, but that she was still my sister, and family should forgive family. I told them that this wasn't just some mistake. This was a calculated betrayal that went on for months. They had both looked me in the eye every single day while they were sleeping together behind my back. My sister had sat at family dinners with me while she was having an affair with my boyfriend. My mom told me I was being dramatic and that I needed to think about the fact that my sister's happiness was at stake. She actually said that. She told me to think about my sister's happiness while I was sitting there having just caught my boyfriend cheating on me with that exact sister. I got up and left without saying another word. Over the next few weeks, I cut off contact with my entire family. My parents kept calling and texting, saying I was being unreasonable and that I needed to be mature about the situation. My sister sent me long messages about how she never wanted this to happen and how much she missed me. Marcus eventually stopped trying to contact me directly, but I heard through friends that he and my sister were officially dating now. About 3 months ago, my parents invited me to Sunday dinner and said it was important. I decided to go because I thought maybe they'd finally come to their senses and wanted to apologize for how they'd handled everything. When I got there, Marcus and my sister were sitting at the table holding hands. My mom asked everyone to sit down because Marcus and my sister had an announcement. I already knew what was coming before my sister held up her hand to show me an engagement ring. Marcus had proposed to my sister. My boyfriend of 4 years, who had been talking about marrying me, had proposed to my 23-year-old sister less than 6 months after our relationship ended. My parents started clapping and congratulating them. My mom was crying happy tears and talking about how beautiful a wedding it would be. My dad shook Marcus' hand and welcomed him officially to the family. I sat there feeling like I was in an alternate universe. Nobody acknowledged how insane this entire situation was. Nobody seemed to remember that 6 months ago, Marcus had been my boyfriend, who I'd been planning a future with. Nobody seemed to care that my sister had betrayed me in the worst possible way. They were all just acting like this was a normal, happy family moment. My sister then said that she wanted to ask me something. She actually looked at me with tears in her eyes and asked if I would be a bridesmaid in her wedding. She said that despite everything that had happened, I was still her big sister, and she couldn't imagine getting married without me there. My mom immediately chimed in saying that it would mean so much to the family if I could find it in my heart to support my sister on her special day. I finally lost it. I told them all that they were absolutely delusional if they thought I was going to celebrate the relationship that destroyed mine. I told my sister that she wasn't just my little sister anymore. She was someone who had betrayed me in a way I would never forgive. I told Marcus that I hoped he realized he was marrying someone who was capable of doing to him exactly what she did to me. I told my parents parents that they had chosen my sister's happiness over my well-being, and that they'd lost a daughter because of it. My dad got angry and told me I was being selfish and holding a grudge. He said that what happened was in the past, and that I needed to move forward for the sake of family unity. My mom started crying and said I was breaking her heart by refusing to be part of this happy occasion. My sister just sat there crying into Marcus's shoulder while he comforted her and glared at me like I was the villain in this situation. I left and haven't spoken to any of them since. That was 3 months ago. Since then, my extended family has gotten involved. My aunts and uncles have been calling me telling me that family is forever and that I need to forgive and forget. My cousins have sent messages saying that while what happened was wrong, my sister and Marcus really do seem happy together and maybe I should give them a chance. My grandmother called me and told me that holding on to anger would only hurt me in the end and that I should think about attending the wedding for my mother's sake, if nothing else. The wedding is supposed to be in 2 months. My mom keeps sending me text messages with wedding details, talking about the venue and the flowers and the dress my sister picked out. She's acting like I've agreed to come, even though I've explicitly said I won't be there. My sister sent me a message last week saying that she's holding a bridesmaid spot open for me and that she's hoping I'll change my mind. She said that she knows she hurt me, but that she's still my sister and she loves me. I've been in therapy trying to process all of this. My therapist has been helpful in validating my feelings and helping me understand that what my family is doing is actually a form of gaslighting. They're trying to rewrite history and make me feel like I'm the problem for not moving past a betrayal that happened 6 months ago. They're expecting me to just show up and smile while my ex-boyfriend marries my sister. Like none of this is completely insane. My friends have all been incredibly supportive and have told me I'm absolutely right to stay away from this situation, but I'd be lying if I said a part of me didn't feel guilty. These are my parents. This is my little sister who I helped raise and took care of when she was growing up. There's a part of me that wonders if I'm being too harsh or if I'm cutting off my family over something I should try to work through, but then I remember walking in on them. I remember the feeling of betrayal and humiliation. I remember how my sister looked me in the eye every day while she was sleeping with my boyfriend. I remember how my parents took their side and expected me to just accept it. And I know that even if I wanted to forgive them, I don't think I could. The trust is completely broken. The hardest part is that I've essentially lost my entire family over this. My parents won't have a relationship with me unless I agree to accept Marcus and my sister's relationship. My sister won't acknowledge that what she did was unforgivable. My extended family thinks I'm being stubborn and vindictive. I'm the bad guy in this story to everyone except my friends and my therapist. I've started building a life without them. I've been focusing on my career, spending time with friends, going to therapy, and trying to heal from the betrayal. Some days are better than others. Some days I wake up and I'm okay with the fact that I no longer have a relationship with my family. Other days I cry because I miss my mom and I miss having a sister and I miss the family I thought I had. I've also been dealing with the fact that I have to see updates about their relationship on social media. I've blocked my sister and Marcus, but other family members post pictures. I've seen photos of them at family gatherings where I'm noticeably absent. I've seen pictures of my sister showing off her ring. I've seen comments from family friends congratulating them and saying they make a beautiful couple. Each time I see something, it's like reopening the wound. Part of me keeps waiting for my family to realize how messed up this situation is. I keep thinking that eventually my mom will call and apologize for how she handled everything. I keep thinking my sister will wake up one day and understand the magnitude of what she did. I keep thinking my dad will tell Marcus that he's not actually welcome in the family, but that hasn't happened. Instead, they're all moving forward with this wedding like it's a normal situation. I've also thought about what happens after the wedding. Will they expect me to show up to Christmas dinner with Marcus as my brother-in-law? Will they expect me to go to family gatherings and sit next to the man who cheated on me while he holds hands with my sister? Will they expect me to be an aunt to their children someday? The thought of any of that makes me physically sick. My therapist keeps reminding me that I'm allowed to set boundaries, and that choosing not to have a relationship with people who hurt me is not the same as holding a grudge. She says that forgiveness doesn't mean I have to let them back into my life, and that I'm allowed to protect my peace. But it's hard when the people asking me to forgive are my own parents, and when the person who betrayed me is my little sister. I guess what hurts the most is that my family has shown me that my feelings don't matter as much as keeping up appearances and maintaining family harmony. They'd rather have me silently accept this betrayal than hold my sister accountable for her actions. They'd rather pressure me to be a bridesmaid than acknowledge that what happened was wrong. They've chosen my sister and Marcus over me, and they've made it very clear that if I want a relationship with them, it will be on their terms. So now I'm faced with a choice. I can either go to this wedding and pretend everything is fine for the sake of my family, or I can stick to my boundaries and continue to be estranged from the people who raised me. Neither option feels good. Both options result in me losing something. But at least if I stick to my boundaries, I keep my self-respect and my sanity. The wedding is in 2 months. I'm not going. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever be able to have a relationship with my family again after this. The damage is done, the trust is broken, and I'm tired of being made to feel like the villain for refusing to celebrate the people who destroyed my life. That's the end of that story. So let me get this straight. Your boyfriend cheated on you with your own sister, your family decided that their love story was more important than your feelings, and now they want you to be a bridesmaid at their wedding. The audacity of your sister to ask you that while wearing the engagement ring from your ex-boyfriend is genuinely mind-blowing, and your parents congratulating them while you're sitting there trying to process the betrayal? That's not family. That's a group of people who have decided that your pain is less important than their comfort. You're not the villain here, no matter how much they try to make you feel like one. Story 2. The Controlling Mother-in-Law. Let's move on to our next story about a mother-in-law who took family involvement to a whole new level of inappropriate. My mother-in-law has a key to our house and rearranges our furniture while we're at work. This is going to sound completely insane, but I need to vent about this somewhere because my husband keeps telling me I'm overreacting. My mother-in-law, who I'll call Linda, has decided that she has the right to enter our home whenever she wants and change things because she doesn't like how we've set up our space. So my husband and I bought our first house about a year ago. It's nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet neighborhood, but it's ours, and we were so excited about it. We spent months picking out furniture, arranging rooms, and making it feel like home. My husband's mom was involved in the whole process, which I thought was sweet at first. She'd come with us to furniture stores and give her opinions on what would look good. She seemed excited for us. When we moved in, we gave her a spare key to the house. This was my husband's idea, and at the time it made sense. He said it would be good for emergencies, like if we locked ourselves out or if something happened and she needed to get in. I agreed because I wanted to have a good relationship with my mother-in-law, and it seemed like a normal thing for family to have a spare key. The problem started about 2 months after we moved in. I came home from work one day and immediately felt like something was off. It took me a few minutes to realize that our living room furniture had been completely rearranged. The couch was on a different wall, the TV stand had been moved, and even the decorative pillows were positioned differently. I thought maybe my husband had decided to change things up, so I texted him asking about it. He had no idea what I was talking about. When he got home, we were both confused. We couldn't figure out who had been in our house or why they'd moved our furniture. Then, my husband got a text from his mom asking if we liked the new living room arrangement. She said she'd stopped by during the day and noticed that the furniture layout wasn't maximizing the natural light, so she fixed it for us. She included several photos of design magazines showing similar layouts. I was stunned. My husband called her and politely told her that while we appreciated her thinking of us, she shouldn't have rearranged our furniture without asking. He said we liked it the way we had it, and would she mind not doing that again? She laughed and said she was just trying to help, and that she had better taste in design anyway, since she'd been decorating homes for 40 years. She told him to leave it how she'd arranged it for at least a week to see if we liked it better. We moved everything back to how we'd had it. I thought that would be the end of it. It was not the end of it, not even close. About a week later, I came home to find that my kitchen had been reorganized. All of my cabinets had been emptied and rearranged. My pots and pans were in different cabinets. My spices were organized differently. My dishes were in a completely different location from where I'd had them. There was a note on the counter from Linda that said, "You'll thank me later. This layout is much more efficient." I was furious. This wasn't just moving furniture. This was going through all of our belongings and changing where we kept things in our own home. I called my husband immediately, and he came home early from work. He called his mom, and this time, he was more firm. He told her that she absolutely could not keep coming into our house and changing things. He said it was disrespectful and invasive, and she needed to ask before coming over from now on. Linda got upset and said she was just trying to help make our house more functional. She said that as someone with more life experience, she could see things we couldn't see, and was only trying to save us from making design mistakes. My husband told her that even if she had good intentions, she needed to stop. She agreed, but I could tell from his face that the conversation hadn't gone well. For about 3 weeks, nothing happened. I thought maybe she'd actually listened. Then I came home one day to find that our bedroom had been redecorated. Our bedspread was different. The curtains were new. There were different picture frames on the dresser, and the furniture was, of course, rearranged. On our bed was a note that said, "Surprise! I knew you two were too busy to update the master bedroom, so I took care of it for you." The old bedspread was so dated. I called my husband in tears. This had crossed every possible line. She'd gone into our bedroom, removed our belongings, and replaced them with things she'd picked out. When my husband confronted her, she said she'd spent her own money on the new items as a gift and thought we'd be grateful. She said the surprise was meant to be a nice gesture, and she didn't understand why we were being so ungrateful. My husband told her she needed to return her key to the house. She refused. She said that as his mother, she had a right to have access to her son's home, and that we were being disrespectful by trying to cut her off from family. My husband told her that if she didn't give the key back voluntarily, we'd have to change the locks. She started crying and said he was breaking her heart by choosing his wife over his mother. This is where it gets even worse. Linda called all of my husband's relatives and told them that I was trying to isolate him from his family. She said I was controlling and manipulative and was trying to damage their relationship. She told everyone that she'd bought us gifts for the house and we'd thrown them in her face. My husband started getting calls and texts from his siblings, his aunts and uncles, and even his grandmother, all telling him that he needed to reconsider and that his mom just wanted to be involved in his life. My husband tried to explain the situation to his family, but Linda had already framed the narrative in a way that made us look like the bad guys. She left out the part about entering our home without permission and rearranging everything. She just focused on the fact that we were revoking her key and pushing her away. We ended up changing the locks because Linda refused to give the key back. When she found out, she showed up at our house crying and saying we'd betrayed her trust. She said that a mother should always have access to her child's home, and that we were treating her like a criminal. My husband stood firm and told her that she'd violated our privacy and our boundaries repeatedly, and that this was the consequence. For a few weeks, Linda didn't speak to us. Then she started showing up at our house unannounced, ringing the doorbell repeatedly, and waiting on the porch until we answered. She'd bring food she'd cooked, or gifts she'd bought, and try to guilt us into letting her in. She'd say things like, "I'm your mother, and I'm standing on your porch like a stranger, and I just want to see my son." My husband started avoiding her calls and texts because every conversation turned into her crying and accusing him of abandoning her. She told him that she'd sacrificed everything to raise him, and this was how he was repaying her. She said I'd brainwashed him and turned him against his own family. She even suggested that maybe we needed marriage counseling because I was clearly controlling the relationship. The situation came to a head about 2 months ago during a family gathering at my husband's sister's house. We'd gone to celebrate his nephew's birthday, and Linda cornered me in the kitchen. She told me that she knew I was the one behind everything, and that if I really loved her son, I'd stop trying to damage their relationship. She said that a good wife would encourage her husband's relationship with his mother, not sabotage it. I told her that I had never tried to sabotage anything, and that the problems in their relationship were directly caused by her inability to respect boundaries. I said that coming into our home without permission and changing our belongings was not normal mother behavior, and that her refusal to acknowledge that was the real issue. She started yelling at me, saying I was disrespectful and ungrateful, and that I had no right to speak to her that way. My husband heard the commotion and came into the kitchen. Linda immediately started crying and told him that I'd attacked her unprovoked. She said I'd cornered her in the kitchen and started criticizing her parenting. My husband, to his credit, told her that he knew that wasn't true and that we were leaving. As we were walking out, Linda shouted that we were both going to regret this and that family always comes back together eventually. Since then, she's continued to call and text both of us constantly. She sends long messages about how hurt she is and how she doesn't understand what she did wrong. She posts passive-aggressive things on social media about children who abandoned their parents and about how hard it is to be a mother who's been cast aside. My husband's family continues to pressure him to reconcile with her, saying that she's getting older and we should forgive her while we still have time. The thing that drives me crazy about this whole situation is that Linda genuinely doesn't think she did anything wrong. In her mind, she was being helpful and involved, and we're being ungrateful and cruel. She can't understand that coming into someone's home without permission and rearranging their belongings is a massive violation of privacy and boundaries. She thinks that being a mother gives her unlimited access to her son's life and home. My husband feels guilty, which I understand. That's his mom and he loves her, but he also recognizes that her behavior was completely inappropriate and that setting boundaries was necessary. We've talked about maybe trying to have a conversation with her where we lay out clear expectations for the relationship moving forward, but every time he tries to talk to her, she just cries and plays the victim. I've suggested family therapy, but Linda refuses, saying, "There's nothing wrong with her, and that we're the ones who need help." She's told my husband that the day he married me was the day he stopped being her son, which is obviously designed to make him feel guilty and come running back to her. At this point, I don't know what the resolution is. We can't have a relationship with someone who refuses to respect our boundaries and who enters our home without permission to rearrange our lives. But my husband is struggling with the fact that he's essentially lost his relationship with his mother over this. His siblings are pressuring him to just give in and give her another key because that's just how mom is, and it's easier to let her do what she wants than to fight with her. But I refuse to live in a home where I never know if my mother-in-law is going to show up and change things around. I refuse to have a relationship based on her terms where we have no privacy or autonomy, and I refuse to teach her that if she just pushes hard enough and cries loud enough, she'll get what she wants, regardless of how we feel about it. So we're at a stalemate. Linda continues to play the victim, my husband's family continues to pressure us to reconcile, and we continue to maintain our boundaries while dealing with the guilt and the family drama that comes with it. It's exhausting and frustrating, and I genuinely don't understand how someone can think it's acceptable to enter their adult child's home and rearrange their furniture without permission. That's the end of that story. Let's talk about someone whose cousin took wedding jealousy to a completely unacceptable level. My cousin faked a medical emergency during my wedding ceremony to steal attention. I got married 6 months ago, and I'm still so angry about what happened that I can barely talk to most of my family. My cousin, who I'll call Jessica, has always been the type of person who needs to be the center of attention at all times. Growing up, she'd throw tantrums if she wasn't getting enough focus at family gatherings. As adults, she'd always find ways to make every event about her somehow. But what she did at my wedding crossed every possible line. My wedding was planned for over a year. My husband and I saved up money, picked out the perfect venue, hired photographers, the whole thing. It was supposed to be this beautiful outdoor ceremony followed by a reception at a vineyard. We had invited about 150 people, including my extended extended family. Jessica had RSVP'd yes and seemed excited about the wedding whenever we talked about it. The day of the wedding arrived, and everything was going perfectly. The weather was beautiful, the flowers looked amazing, and I felt like I was in a dream. My bridesmaids helped me get ready, and we were all having this wonderful moment together. I was so happy and excited to marry the love of my life. The ceremony was scheduled to start at 4 p.m. All of our guests were seated in the chairs we'd set up outside, overlooking the vineyard. My bridesmaids had already walked down the aisle. The music started playing for my entrance with my dad. I took a deep breath, linked arms with my father, and started walking down the aisle. I was about halfway down the aisle when I heard a scream. Jessica, who was sitting in the third row, suddenly stood up and grabbed her chest. She started gasping and saying she couldn't breathe. She stumbled into the aisle and collapsed onto the ground. People immediately rushed to her side. Someone shouted to call 911. My dad stopped walking and looked at me, unsure of what to do. The entire ceremony came to a halt. Guests were crowding around Jessica, who was lying on the ground moaning and saying her chest hurt. My aunt was crying and holding Jessica's hand. My uncle was on the phone with emergency services. The officiant didn't know whether to continue or stop. I just stood there in my wedding dress, frozen. While my ceremony fell apart around me, I told my dad we should continue walking so we could see what was happening. When we got to where Jessica was lying, she had her eyes closed and was breathing rapidly. People were fanning her with their programs, and someone had brought her water. My mom came up to me and said we needed to wait to start the ceremony until we knew Jessica was okay. I felt terrible for even thinking it, but something felt off. Jessica had been fine literally 5 minutes earlier. I'd seen her laughing and talking with other guests while I was getting final touch-ups done to my makeup inside. And now suddenly, she was having some kind of medical crisis right as I started walking down the aisle. The ambulance arrived about 15 minutes later. The paramedics checked Jessica out while all of our wedding guests watched. They asked her questions about her symptoms and medical history. They took her blood pressure and checked her heart rate. After examining her, they said her vitals were normal and asked if she wanted to go to the hospital to get checked out more thoroughly. Jessica said yes, she wanted to go to be safe. They loaded her onto a stretcher and wheeled her to the ambulance. My aunt and uncle went with her, along with a few other relatives who wanted to make sure she was okay. About 20 of our 150 guests left to go to the hospital with Jessica or to follow up with her. The whole ordeal took about 45 minutes from start to finish. By the time we were ready to resume the ceremony, the sun was starting to set and we were way behind schedule. The photographer was stressed about losing the good lighting. My makeup artist had to come back and fix my face because I'd been crying. My bridesmaids were trying to console me while also being concerned about Jessica. The whole vibe of the ceremony had completely changed. We ended up doing the ceremony, but it felt rushed and off. I couldn't focus on my vows because I kept thinking about Jessica in the ambulance. Guests were distracted and whispering about what had happened. Instead of the joyful, perfect ceremony I'd imagined, it felt chaotic and stressful. During our first kiss as a married couple, half the guests were on their phones trying to get updates about Jessica's condition. The reception was similarly affected. People kept talking about Jessica's medical emergency instead of celebrating our marriage. My aunt kept calling with updates from the hospital. The DJ made an announcement asking everyone to keep Jessica in their thoughts. My mom spent half the reception on the phone with relatives who'd gone to the hospital. It felt like my wedding had become a sidebar to Jessica's medical drama. Around 9 p.m., my aunt called my mom with an update. Jessica was fine. The hospital had run tests and found nothing wrong with her. They said it might have been a panic attack or anxiety, gave her some anti-anxiety medication, and sent her home. My mom came up to me during the reception and told me the good news. I smiled and said I was glad Jessica was okay, but inside I was furious. A panic attack right as I started walking down the aisle, at the exact moment when all eyes were supposed to be on me, after she'd been completely fine before the ceremony started. It felt like way too much of a coincidence, but I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt because I didn't want to be the person who accused someone of faking a medical emergency. The next day, my husband and I left for our honeymoon. While we were gone, I started seeing posts on social media. Jessica had posted multiple times about her scary medical emergency at my wedding. She posted pictures of herself in the hospital bed with IVs in her arm. She posted about how frightening it was to not be able to breathe and how she was so grateful to the paramedics who saved her life. She talked about how the experience had made her realize how precious life was. Her posts got tons of attention. People were commenting, saying they were glad she was okay, and asking what had happened. She responded to each comment with more details about her symptoms and her hospital experience. She posted a long story about the importance of listening to your body and not ignoring warning signs. She never once mentioned that it was my wedding where this had happened, or that she'd disrupted the ceremony. When we got back from our honeymoon, I decided to reach out to Jessica to check on her. I texted, asking how she was feeling, and if the doctors had figured out what had happened. She responded saying she was fine, and that it had probably just been stress and anxiety. She said she felt terrible about what had happened at my wedding and hoped it hadn't ruined the day too much. That message annoyed me more than it should have. Hoped it hadn't ruined the day too much? It had absolutely ruined the day. But I responded politely, saying I was glad she was okay and that these things happen. I was trying to be the bigger person, even though I was still upset about how the wedding had gone. About a month after the wedding, I was talking to my younger cousin, who's Jessica's sister. We were catching up and talking about the wedding when she said something that made my blood boil. She mentioned that Jessica had told her she'd been feeling anxious about the wedding because her ex-boyfriend was going to be there with his new girlfriend. Jessica and this guy had dated years ago, but apparently seeing him moved on had triggered something in her. I asked my younger cousin to clarify what she meant. She explained that Jessica had told her that morning of my wedding that she was dreading seeing her ex and his new girlfriend. She said Jessica had taken an anxiety pill before the ceremony to help calm her nerves, but it had made her feel weird and lightheaded. When she saw her ex and his girlfriend sitting a few rows away during the ceremony, she'd started to panic, and that is when she'd had her episode. So let me get this straight. Jessica knew she was anxious about seeing her ex. She took medication that made her feel strange, and then she had a panic attack right as I was walking down the aisle, not because of some random medical emergency, but because of her own relationship drama that she'd brought to my wedding. I was livid. This wasn't some unavoidable health crisis. This was Jessica letting her personal issues overshadow my wedding day, and instead of pulling herself together or quietly excusing herself, she'd made a scene that required an ambulance and took attention away from my ceremony. I called Jessica and asked her directly if what my younger cousin had told me was true. Jessica hesitated and then admitted that yes, she'd been anxious about seeing her ex, and that might have contributed to her panic attack, but she maintained that the panic attack itself was real and uncontrollable, and that she hadn't meant to cause a scene. I told her that I understood panic attacks were real, but that she'd known she was having anxiety about attending the wedding, and she could have handled it differently. She could have taken a moment to herself before the ceremony started. She could have quietly left if she was feeling overwhelmed. She could have done literally anything other than collapse in the middle of the aisle right as I was walking to marry my husband. Jessica got defensive and said I was being unsympathetic to her mental health struggles. She said that panic attacks don't care about timing, and that I was making her feel guilty for something she couldn't control. She said she'd already felt terrible about what happened, and I was making it worse by attacking her. I told her I wasn't attacking her, but I was allowed to be upset that my wedding ceremony was derailed because she'd brought relationship baggage to my event and hadn't managed it appropriately. I said that the fact that she'd spent the days after posting all over social media about her medical emergency without acknowledging that it had happened during my wedding showed where her priorities were. Jessica started crying and said I was being cruel and unsupportive. She said she'd thought we were close, and she couldn't believe I was treating her this way over an accident. She said that if I was a real friend and cousin, I would be more concerned about her health than about my wedding being interrupted. That comment made me even angrier. I told her that my wedding wasn't just interrupted, it was completely overshadowed by her drama. I said that I'd spent a year planning this event and thousands of dollars making it perfect, and she'd turned it into a referendum on her anxiety and her ex-boyfriend. I said that a real friend and cousin would have found a way to manage her issues without making herself the center of attention at someone else's wedding. We haven't spoken since that conversation. Jessica told her side of the story to our extended family, painting me as someone who is more concerned about having a perfect wedding than about her well-being. She said I'd called her and berated her for having a panic attack and made her feel terrible about something she couldn't control. She said I'd shown my true colors by prioritizing aesthetics over family. My family is divided on the issue. Some people think I'm being too harsh, and that Jessica really did have a medical emergency that she couldn't help. They say that panic attacks are serious, and that I should be more understanding. Other people think Jessica should have handled her anxiety better, and that having a public meltdown during my ceremony was inappropriate regardless of the cause. My mom tries to stay neutral, but has suggested that maybe I should apologize to Jessica for how I handled the confrontation. She says that even if I'm right to be upset, family is more important than holding grudges. My husband thinks Jessica absolutely did this on purpose for attention, and that I shouldn't feel bad about being angry. Looking back at my wedding photos and videos, all I can see is that moment when everything stopped. There are pictures of me standing halfway down the aisle with a confused look on my face. There's video footage of guests crowding around Jessica instead of watching me and my dad walk. There are photos of the ambulance in the background during our reception. Instead of having beautiful memories of my perfect day, I have constant reminders of how Jessica's drama took over. What bothers me most is that Jessica has never really apologized. She said she feels bad that it happened, but she's never acknowledged that she could have handled things differently. She's never taken responsibility for bringing her ex-boyfriend drama to my wedding. She's never admitted that posting all over social media about her hospital visit without mentioning it was my wedding was selfish. She just continues to play the victim and act like I'm the bad guy for being upset. I've tried to move past it, but it's hard when I look at my wedding album and feel angry instead of happy. It's hard when family members bring up the incident at every gathering. It's hard when Jessica continues to post about her anxiety journey online and gets praised for being so brave and vulnerable, while I'm supposed to just forget that she ruined one of the most important days of my life. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive Jessica for this. Maybe I'm being petty or holding on to anger that I should let go, but every time I think about my wedding, instead of remembering my vows or my first dance or the beautiful venue, I remember Jessica lying in the aisle while paramedics surrounded her and my ceremony ground to a halt, and I don't think I'll ever be okay with that. That's the end of that story. So your cousin had a panic attack because of her ex-boyfriend drama, and decided the best time and place for that was right when you were walking down the aisle. Then she spent the next few weeks posting about her hospital visit all over social media without ever acknowledging she'd derailed your entire wedding, and now she's mad at you for being upset about it. The mental gymnastics required to make yourself the victim in this situation while you literally hijack someone's wedding ceremony is truly impressive. You have every right to be angry, and honestly, your family expecting you to just get over it is ridiculous. Our next story comes from someone whose friend group had a very different idea of what constitutes an appropriate surprise. My friends threw me a surprise birthday party and invited my abusive ex without telling me. I need to get this off my chest because I'm still processing what happened and I feel like I'm going insane. My birthday was 3 weeks ago, and my friends decided to throw me a surprise party. That sounds nice, right? Except they invited my ex-boyfriend, who I have a restraining order against, and didn't think to mention that to me before I walked into the party. Some background: I dated my ex, who I'll call Ryan, for 2 years. The relationship started out great, but gradually became controlling and then abusive. He He'd check my phone constantly, didn't want me hanging out with friends without him, would accuse me of cheating if I so much as talked to another guy, and eventually became physically aggressive. The final straw was when he shoved me into a wall during an argument, and I hit my head hard enough to get a concussion. I left him immediately after that incident and got a restraining order. That was about a year and a half ago. The restraining order states that he's supposed to stay at least 500 feet away from me at all times. I had to get the restraining order because Ryan wouldn't leave me alone after we broke up. He'd show up at my work, send me hundreds of texts, create fake social media accounts to message me, and generally make my life hell. Getting that restraining order and cutting all contact with Ryan was one of the hardest but most important things I've ever done. I've spent the past year and a half in therapy, working through the trauma of that relationship and rebuilding my life. My friends knew all of this. They were there when I was going through it. They helped me pack my stuff and leave. They sat with me while I cried and processed everything. They drove me to therapy appointments and made sure I was eating and taking care of myself. So you can imagine my shock when I walked into my surprise birthday party and saw Ryan standing there with a gift in his hands. Here's what happened. My friend group consists of about 8 people I've known since college. We're all close and usually hang out together pretty regularly. About a month before my birthday, my friend Sarah asked me if I wanted to do anything special. I said I wasn't really in the mood for anything big and would probably just have a quiet dinner with a few people. She said that sounded nice and that she'd help me organize something. What I didn't know was that Sarah and the rest of my friends were planning a surprise party at another friend's house. They'd coordinated with each other, sent out invitations to a bunch of people from our extended friend group, and planned this whole elaborate thing. Again, that sounds sweet, except for what happened next. Apparently, Ryan had reached out to Sarah on Instagram a few weeks before my birthday. He'd sent her a message saying he knew my birthday was coming up, and he wanted to send me a gift to apologize for how things had ended between us. He told Sarah that he'd been in therapy and had worked through his issues and wanted to make amends. He said he respected my space, but hoped I might be willing to accept an apology and a birthday gift. Sarah, for reasons I still don't understand, thought this was a redemption story in the making. She thought Ryan was genuinely trying to change, and that this could be a beautiful moment of closure and healing. She talked to a few of the other people in our friend group, and they agreed that maybe it would be nice to give Ryan a chance to apologize properly. They decided, without asking me, that they'd invite Ryan to the surprise party so he could give me his gift and his apology in person. Nobody thought to run this by me first. Nobody thought to consider that there was a restraining order in place for a reason. Nobody thought about the fact that I might not want to see the person who gave me a concussion at my birthday party. They just decided that this would be a nice surprise on top of the surprise party. The night of my birthday, my friend Emma picked me up under the pretense of going to dinner. She drove me to our friend Mike's house instead. When I walked in, everyone yelled, "Surprise!" and I was genuinely shocked and happy. The house was decorated, there was food and drinks, and a bunch of people I cared about were there to celebrate me. I was smiling and hugging people and feeling really loved. And then I saw Ryan standing in the corner of the living room. My whole body went cold. I immediately looked around for an exit, but I was surrounded by people hugging me and wishing me happy birthday. My heart started racing, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. This was the person who had hurt me, who had traumatized me, who I'd legally barred from being near me, and he was at my birthday party. Sarah came up to me with a big smile and said, "We have another surprise for you. Ryan wanted to come and apologize. Isn't that amazing? He's been working on himself, and he really wants to make things right." She said it like she'd just told me I'd won the lottery. I couldn't form words. I just stared at her in disbelief. Ryan started walking toward me with a wrapped gift and a nervous smile. People around me were watching like this was some kind of heartwarming moment they were about to witness. I finally found my voice and said, "Get him out of here, now." The smile dropped from Sarah's face. She looked confused and said, "What? He just wants to talk to you. He came all this way." I raised my voice and said, "I have a restraining order against him. He's not supposed to be anywhere near me. Get him out of this house right now, or I'm calling the police." The room went silent. People who didn't know the full story about my relationship with Ryan looked shocked. Ryan stopped walking toward me and put his hands up like he was trying to show he wasn't a threat. He said, "I just wanted to apologize. I've changed. I just want 5 minutes to talk." I pulled out my phone and started dialing 911. I told everyone that if Ryan wasn't out of the house in the next 30 seconds, I was calling the cops and he'd be arrested for violating the restraining order. Ryan's face changed from nervous to angry. He threw the gift on the floor and said, "I can't believe you're still holding on to this. I tried to make things right and you're threatening me with the cops. You're insane." Sarah and Mike finally stepped in and told Ryan he needed to leave. He argued for a minute, saying that they'd invited him and this wasn't fair. Eventually, Mike physically escorted him out of the house. The whole time, Ryan was yelling about how he'd been set up and how he was just trying to apologize, and I was being dramatic. After Ryan left, I stood in the middle of the party shaking. A few friends came up and apologized, saying they had no idea there was a restraining order and they thought Ryan was just an ex I'd had a bad breakup with. But Sarah, Emma, and a couple of others had known about the restraining order. They'd known about the abuse, and they'd invited him anyway. I confronted Sarah immediately. I asked her what she was thinking, inviting someone I have a legal order against to my birthday party. She started crying and said she thought she was doing something good. She said Ryan had seemed really sincere in his messages, and she thought I'd appreciate the chance to get closure. She said she'd talked to Emma and a few others, and they'd all agreed it was worth a shot. I told her that it wasn't her decision to make. I told her that the restraining order existed because Ryan was dangerous and unpredictable, and she'd put me in a situation where I felt unsafe at what was supposed to be a celebration. I told her that she'd violated my trust in the worst possible way. Emma chimed in and said that maybe I was being too harsh, and that Ryan did seem like he'd changed. She said that holding on to anger and refusing to forgive people wasn't healthy. She said that maybe this was a sign that I needed to work on letting go of the past. I lost it. I told them both that they had no right to decide when or if I forgive my abuser. I told them that they'd ambushed me with the person who'd given me a concussion and then had the audacity to suggest I was the one being unreasonable. I said that real friends would have asked me before inviting my abusive ex to my party, and the fact that they didn't showed how little they actually respected me. I left the party. A few friends followed me out and apologized profusely. They said they'd had no idea what Sarah and Emma were planning, and they were horrified. They offered to take me home and make sure I was okay. I appreciated their support, but the damage was done. My birthday party, which was supposed to be this nice surprise, had turned into a traumatic encounter with my abuser. The days following the party were a mess. Sarah and Emma kept texting me trying to explain themselves. They said they'd made a mistake, but their hearts were in the right place. They said they thought they were helping me heal, and they didn't realize I'd react so strongly. They said that maybe I was overreacting and that Ryan really did seem sorry. That last part made me see red. I responded and told them that questioning whether I overreacted to seeing my abuser at my party was victim blaming. I told them that the fact that they still didn't understand why what they did was wrong showed that they weren't actually sorry. They just didn't like that I was mad at them. Other friends in the group reached out to check on me and condemn what Sarah and Emma had done, but there were a few who tried to play peacemaker, saying that Sarah and Emma had made a mistake, but they'd meant well, and maybe we should all just move past it. That frustrated me too, because it felt like people were more concerned with keeping the friend group intact than with the fact that I'd been put in actual danger. I ended up filing a police report about Ryan showing up at the party since he'd violated the restraining order. The police contacted him and warned him that if he came near me again, he'd be arrested. I also cut off contact with Sarah and Emma. I told them that I couldn't be friends with people who thought it was acceptable to invite my abuser to my party without my knowledge or consent. Sarah sent me a long message saying that she was hurt that I was ending our friendship over one mistake. She said that she'd been there for me through everything with Ryan, and I was throwing away our friendship because of a misunderstanding. She said that I was being unforgiving and cruel. I didn't respond because it wasn't a misunderstanding or a simple mistake. It was a massive violation of my boundaries and my safety. It was a fundamental lack of respect for my trauma and my healing process, and it was a demonstration that Sarah valued the idea of orchestrating some kind of redemption story more than she valued my comfort and safety. Some people in the friend group have maintained relationships with both me and Sarah, which I understand but don't love. Others have picked sides. The whole dynamic of our friend group has changed, and honestly, I'm okay with that, because this situation showed me who really has my back and who's willing to prioritize keeping the peace over protecting me. I had to start seeing my therapist more frequently after this incident. The surprise encounter with Ryan triggered a lot of anxiety and brought back memories I'd been working hard to process. I had nightmares for weeks and felt constantly on edge, worried that Ryan might show up again somewhere. My therapist said what my friends did was a serious breach of trust, and that my feelings were completely valid. My birthday was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it became another traumatic memory associated with my abusive ex. I can't think about turning another year older without remembering the moment I walked into that party and saw Ryan standing there with a gift. I can't think about surprise parties without feeling anxious, and I can't think about Sarah and Emma without feeling angry and betrayed. The worst part is that Sarah and Emma still don't fully understand why what they did was wrong. They understand that I'm upset, and they're sorry that I'm upset, but they don't actually comprehend that inviting someone's abuser to their party without consent is not a mistake, it's a violation. They thought they were engineering some kind of beautiful moment of forgiveness and closure without considering that forgiveness isn't something they get to orchestrate for someone else. It's been 3 weeks, and I'm still processing everything. I'm grieving the loss of friendships I thought were solid. I'm angry that my birthday was ruined. I'm frustrated that I have to explain to people why this was such a big deal, and I'm sad that I can't trust some of the people I thought knew me best. I don't regret cutting Sarah and Emma off. I don't regret filing the police report against Ryan, and I don't regret leaving my own birthday party to protect myself, but I am sad that it had to happen at all. I'm sad that my friends thought they knew better than me about what I needed, and I'm sad that I lost people I cared about because they couldn't respect a very simple boundary. Don't invite my abuser to my party. That's the end of that story. Your friends really thought they were starring in some kind of redemption movie where the abusive ex apologizes and everyone cries happy tears and hugs it out. Except this isn't a movie. You have a restraining order against this person for a reason, and they completely ignored that for their own feel-good moment. The fact that they still don't fully understand why you're upset is actually terrifying. These are people who should have protected you, and instead, they invited danger directly to you. You were absolutely right to cut them off. Let's move on to a story about a brother who had some very creative ideas about what belonged to him. My brother convinced my dying grandmother to change her will and leave everything to him. I don't even know where to start with this because the betrayal is so deep and so calculated that I still can't believe it happened. My grandmother passed away 4 months ago, and I just found out that my brother manipulated her into changing her will in the months before she died, effectively cutting me and my sister out of everything she'd planned to leave us. My grandmother was an incredible woman. She raised 3 kids as a single mother after my grandfather died young, worked 2 jobs to put them through college, and still managed to be the most loving and present grandmother to me, my brother, and my sister. She was the matriarch of our family, and everyone adored her. About 2 years ago, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The doctors gave her maybe 2 to 3 years, and she decided she wanted to spend that time getting her affairs in order and making sure her family was taken care of after she was gone. My grandmother had a decent amount of money saved up, plus she owned her house outright, which was worth about $400,000. She'd told all of us for years that when she passed, she wanted to split everything equally between her 3 grandchildren, me, me, my brother David, and my sister Rachel. She'd shown us the will years ago, and talked about how she wanted to make sure we were all set up after she was gone. It wasn't about the money for any of us. It was about knowing that our grandmother wanted to take care of us even after she wasn't around anymore. When she got her diagnosis, my grandmother sat us all down and confirmed that her will was still the same, and that everything would be split 3 ways. She told us where to find her important documents, explained her final wishes, and made sure we all understood what she wanted. My brother, sister, and I all agreed to honor her wishes and to support each other through the grief when the time came. About 6 months before my grandmother passed, I noticed that my brother was spending a lot more time with her. He'd always been close to her, but suddenly he was over at her house almost every day. He'd volunteer to take her to doctor's appointments, help her with errands, cook her meals, and generally be very attentive. My sister and I thought it was sweet that he was stepping up to help during this difficult time. We both had demanding jobs and young kids, so we visited as often as we could, but not as frequently as David did. My grandmother's health declined rapidly in those last few months. She needed more and more help with daily tasks, and David became her primary caregiver. My sister and I offered to hire a professional nurse or to take turns staying with her, but my grandmother said David was taking such good care of her that she didn't need anyone else. She seemed happy and comfortable, so we didn't push it. When my grandmother passed, it was devastating for all of us. The funeral was beautiful, and our whole family came together to mourn and celebrate her life. About a week after the funeral, my grandmother's lawyer contacted us to discuss the will. He asked me, David, and Rachel to come to his office for the reading. That's when everything fell apart. The lawyer read out the will, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My grandmother had changed her will 3 months before she died. Instead of splitting everything 3 ways, like she'd always said, she'd left everything to David. The house, the money, all of her possessions, everything went to my brother. My sister and I got nothing. I immediately thought there had been some mistake. I told the lawyer that couldn't be right, that my grandmother had always said she was leaving everything to all 3 of us equally. The lawyer said that my grandmother had come in with David 3 months earlier and had explicitly changed the will to leave everything to him. He showed us the document with her signature. I looked at David, expecting him to be as shocked as I was, but he wasn't shocked. He was sitting there calmly, like he'd known this was coming. I asked him directly if he'd known about this, and he admitted that yes, he'd known. He said that in the months before she died, Grandma had realized that he was the one who'd really been there for her, and she wanted to show her appreciation. My sister started crying and asking how this could have happened. David said that our grandmother had seen how much he'd sacrificed to take care of her in her final months, and she'd decided he deserved to inherit everything. He said it was her choice, and we should respect her wishes. But something didn't feel right. Our grandmother had been very clear for decades about wanting to treat all of her grandchildren equally. She'd always said that families should take care of each other, and that she wanted to make sure we were all provided for. The idea that she'd suddenly changed her mind and decided to leave everything to just one grandchild seemed completely out of character. Over the next few weeks, I did some investigating. I talked to my grandmother's neighbors and her friends from church. Multiple people told me that in those last few months, my grandmother had seemed confused and forgetful. Her doctor had noted in her medical records that she was experiencing cognitive decline, likely due to the progression of her cancer and the strong pain medications she was on. She'd had moments of lucidity, but she'd also had periods where she didn't quite know where she was or what was happening. I also found out from one of her neighbors that David had been very protective of my grandmother's time in those final months. The neighbor said she'd tried to visit several times, but David had told her that my grandmother was too tired for visitors. Other friends said the same thing, that David had essentially become a gatekeeper, limiting who could see her and when. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that David had taken advantage of our grandmother's vulnerable state. I think he'd isolated her, limited her contact with other family members and friends, and then convinced her while she was confused and medicated to change her will. I confronted him about this, and he denied everything. He said our grandmother had been of of sound mind when she changed the will, and that I was just bitter about not getting money I felt entitled to. My sister and I consulted with several lawyers about whether we could contest the will. They all said the same thing. It would be very difficult and expensive to prove that our grandmother wasn't of sound mind when she signed the new will, especially since her doctor had declared her competent enough to make medical decisions right up until the end. David had been smart about it. He'd taken her to change the will during one of her more lucid periods, so there was documentation of her being clear-headed at that specific moment, even if she was confused and declining overall. The lawyers estimated it would cost us tens of thousands of dollars to contest the will, with no guarantee we'd win. Even if we did win, the legal fees would eat up a significant portion of the inheritance anyway. My sister couldn't afford to take that financial risk, and honestly, neither could I. David knew that. He'd calculated that even if we suspected what he'd done, we wouldn't be able to prove it or afford to fight it. So David got everything. He inherited the house, which he immediately sold for $400,000. He inherited all of the money in our grandmother's accounts, which totaled about $150,000. He inherited her jewelry, her car, all of her possessions. My sister and I got nothing except for a few small sentimental items that David graciously allowed us to take from the house before he sold it. The betrayal goes beyond just the money, though. David destroyed our family in the process. My sister and I haven't spoken to him since we found out what he did. Our parents are devastated and don't know how to handle the situation. They're angry at David for what he did, but he's still their son, and they don't want to cut him off completely. Family gatherings are now awkward and tense because my sister and I refuse to be in the same room as David. David, for his part, shows absolutely no remorse. He maintains that our grandmother changed her will of her own free will, and that he did nothing wrong. He says that he was the one who sacrificed to take care of her, and he deserved to be compensated for that. He's used the inheritance money to buy a new house and new cars, and he posts pictures of his upgraded lifestyle on social media like nothing happened. What kills me is that our grandmother would be horrified if she knew what had happened. She'd spent her whole life preaching about the importance of family and treating people fairly. She'd raised us to look out for each other and to never let money come between us. And in her final, vulnerable months, her own grandson manipulated her into doing the exact opposite of everything she'd stood for. I think about all the times my grandmother talked about wanting to help all of us. She'd specifically said she wanted to make sure my sister and I could help with our kids' college funds or put down payments on houses. She'd had specific ideas about how the inheritance would help each of us. And David took all of that away, not because he needed the money more than we did, but because he could. My sister has 2 young kids, and was counting on the inheritance to help with their education. I was planning to use it to finally start the business I'd been dreaming about for years. We weren't entitled to that money just because our grandmother had it, but she'd promised it to us for decades, and had specifically told us it was coming. We'd made life plans based on that assumption because she'd been so clear and consistent about her intentions. Now David has over $500,000 that should have been split 3 ways, and my sister and I are left with nothing but the knowledge that our brother is a manipulative person who took advantage of a dying woman. Every time I think about it, I get angry all over again. I'm angry at David for what he did. I'm angry at myself for not being more present in those final months. I'm angry at the system that made it too expensive for us to fight back. And I'm sad that my grandmother's final act, which was supposed to be a gesture of love toward all of her grandchildren, was corrupted into something that tore our family apart. I've heard through relatives that David has tried to justify his actions by saying he earned the inheritance through the care he provided, but that's not how love and family are supposed to work. You don't take care of a dying family member with the expectation of financial reward. You do it because you love them and want them to be comfortable in their final days. The fact that David sees his caregiving as a transaction that entitled him to the entire inheritance just shows how different differently he views family than the rest of us do. My parents have tried to mediate and get us all to reconcile, but I don't see how that's possible. David would have to admit what he did, return the money, and make things right, and he's never going to do that. He's too invested in his narrative that he deserves everything because he was there when she needed him most. He can't admit that he manipulated a vulnerable, dying woman because then he'd have to face what kind of person that makes him. So now our family is fractured, possibly permanently. My sister and I have each other, but we've lost our brother. Our parents are caught in the middle, trying to maintain relationships with all of their children, but struggling with the weight of what David did. Extended family members have taken sides or try to stay neutral, which just makes every family event uncomfortable. And David has his inheritance money. He has the house and the cars and the upgraded lifestyle, but he doesn't have a relationship with his siblings. He doesn't have the respect of most of his extended family, and he'll have to live with the knowledge that he got his comfortable life by betraying his dying grandmother and his own family. I hope it was worth it to him because he lost more than he gained, even if he doesn't realize it yet. That's the end of that story. So your brother essentially moved in with your dying grandmother, isolated her from everyone else, waited until she was medicated and confused, and then convinced her to change her will to cut you and your sister out completely. And now he's living his best life with money that was supposed to be split 3 ways, while acting like he did nothing wrong. The fact that he justified it by saying he earned it through caregiving is actually disgusting. Taking care of a family member isn't supposed to be a business transaction. You don't keep a dying grandmother comfortable in exchange for her entire estate. That's not love, that's manipulation, and your family will probably never be the same because of his greed. Let's talk about someone whose mother decided that a proposal was the perfect time to make everything about her. My mom announced her engagement at the same moment my boyfriend was proposing to me. I got engaged 2 months ago, and I'm still trying to process what happened during what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. My boyfriend, now fiancé, had planned this elaborate proposal, and my mom completely hijacked it to make an announcement of her own. I've been trying to be understanding, but the more I think about it, the angrier I get. Some background: my boyfriend Alex and I have been together for 5 years. We'd been talking about marriage for a while, and I knew a proposal was coming eventually. I didn't know when or how, but we'd looked at rings together and discussed our future, so it wasn't a surprise that it was on the horizon. My mom has been single for about 7 years since my parents divorced. She dated here and there, but nothing serious, until about 8 months ago when she met a guy named Tom at her book club. She was really excited about him and talked about him constantly. Tom seemed nice enough from what I'd heard, though I'd only met him a handful of times at family dinners. Their relationship moved pretty quickly, but my mom seemed happy, so I was happy for her. About 3 months ago, Alex asked me if I wanted to go on a weekend trip to this beautiful resort town where we'd vacationed together when we first started dating. He said it would be nice to get away and celebrate our 5-year anniversary. I thought it sounded perfect and started looking forward to it. A few weeks before the trip, my mom called me and asked what Alex and I were doing for our anniversary. I told her about the weekend trip, and she got really excited. She said that sounded wonderful and romantic. Then she asked if she and Tom could come along. She said they'd stay in a separate hotel and wouldn't bother us, but she'd always wanted to visit that town and thought it would be fun to make it a group trip. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but my mom seemed really eager, and I didn't want to disappoint her. I talked to Alex about it, and he seemed hesitant, but said if it was important to me, we could make it work. So I told my mom okay, and she booked a hotel room at the same resort where we were staying. The weekend of the trip arrived, and Alex and I drove up to the resort. My mom and Tom arrived a few hours later. The first day was fine. We all had lunch together. Then my mom and Tom went off to do their own thing, while Alex and I explored the town. That evening, we all had dinner together at the resort's restaurant. It was pleasant, if a bit awkward, having my mom and her boyfriend on what was supposed to be a romantic getaway for me and Alex. The next day, Alex suggested we all go on a hike together to the scenic overlook that had beautiful views of the valley. My mom and Tom were excited about the idea, so the 4 of us set off that afternoon. The hike was gorgeous. The The weather was perfect, and when we got to the overlook, the view was absolutely stunning. We were all standing there looking at the view and taking pictures when Alex suddenly got down on one knee. My heart stopped. This was it. This was the proposal. He had planned to do it at this beautiful spot with the incredible view in the background. He started saying these beautiful things about our relationship and our future together, and I was already crying happy tears. And then, right in the middle of Alex's proposal speech, my mom suddenly shouted, "We're getting married too." I looked over at her in confusion, tears still streaming down my face. Tom was standing next to her, looking uncomfortable. My mom had this huge smile on her face and was holding up her left hand to show a ring. She was waving her hand around and talking about how Tom had proposed to her that morning, and she'd been dying to tell me, but wanted to wait for the right moment. And when she saw Alex proposing, she realized this was the perfect time to share her news too. Alex stopped talking mid-sentence. He was still on one knee, holding the ring box, looking between me and my mom with this expression of total confusion. I was standing there trying to process what was happening. Was my mom really announcing her engagement in the middle of my proposal? My mom kept talking, saying something about how special it was that we'd both be getting married and could plan weddings together. Tom looked like he wanted to disappear. Alex slowly stood up, clearly not sure what to do. The whole moment was completely derailed. I looked at Alex, and he looked at me, and I realized he hadn't even finished proposing. My mom had interrupted before he'd actually asked the question. I said to him, "Were you in the middle of something?" He gave this sad little laugh and said, "Yeah, I was." Then he got back down on one knee and finished his proposal quickly, asking if I would marry him. I said yes, obviously, but the moment was ruined. My mom came over and hugged both of us, talking about how exciting it was that we'd both gotten engaged on the same trip. She was taking pictures and posting them on social media immediately, captioning them about how she and her daughter got engaged on the same day. Alex looked devastated. This proposal had clearly been planned carefully, and my mom had completely trampled all over it. That evening, back at the resort, I finally got a moment alone with my mom. I asked her why she had announced her engagement in the middle of my proposal. She looked confused and said she thought it was sweet that we could share the moment. She said she'd been so excited about her own engagement that when she saw Alex proposing to me, she got caught up in the joy of it all and wanted to share her news too. I tried to explain that Alex had been in the middle of proposing and she'd interrupted. She said she didn't interrupt, she just added to the celebration. She said that I was being selfish by wanting the whole moment to be just about me. She said that her engagement was just as important as mine, and she had every right to be excited and share her news. I was so frustrated I didn't even know what to say. Alex was upset, but trying not to show it because he didn't want to cause drama. He kept saying it was fine, and that what mattered was that I said yes, but I could tell he was hurt that his carefully planned proposal had been hijacked. The rest of the weekend was awkward. My mom kept trying to talk about wedding planning for both of our weddings. She was suggesting we could have a double wedding, or plan our ceremonies close together so they could coordinate. She was talking about venues and dresses, and completely oblivious to the fact that she'd ruined my engagement. When we got home, I looked at the photos from the proposal. In every single one, my mom is visible in the background or foreground, either waving her ring hand or hugging Tom. There's not a single photo from my actual proposal that doesn't include my mom celebrating her own engagement. The moment that was supposed to be about me and Alex had completely become about her. I talked to my friends about what happened, and they were all horrified. They couldn't believe my mom had done that. My best friend said that even if my mom had gotten engaged that morning and was excited, any reasonable person would have waited until after the proposal was over to share their news. She said my mom had to have known that interrupting in the middle of someone else's proposal was inappropriate, but when I tried to talk to my mom about it again, she got defensive. She said I was being dramatic and ungrateful. She said that she'd raised me by herself after the divorce, and all she wanted was to share in my happiness, and I was making her feel bad for being excited about her own life. She said that I was being a bridezilla before I'd even started planning a wedding. That comment really hurt. I wasn't being a bridezilla. I was upset that my mom had hijacked one of the most important moments of my life. There's a difference. But my mom couldn't seem to understand that. She kept insisting that she hadn't done anything wrong and that I was overreacting. Since then, my mom has continued to act like this is a fun thing we're doing together. She calls me constantly to talk about wedding planning, but half the conversation is always about her wedding. She'll ask about my ideas, and then immediately launch into what she and Tom are thinking. She sends me photos of dresses, and I can't tell if she's suggesting them for me or showing me what she's considering for herself. She's also started telling everyone the story of how we got engaged on the same day. She tells it like it's this adorable, serendipitous thing, completely glossing over the fact that she interrupted my actual proposal. People who hear the story think it's sweet without realizing what actually happened. When I've tried to correct the narrative and explain that she announced her engagement in the middle of my boyfriend proposing, my mom says I'm being negative and ruining a beautiful memory. Alex has been incredibly patient about the whole thing, but I know he's disappointed. He'd spent weeks planning that proposal. He'd picked the location carefully, had a whole speech prepared, and had even arranged for a photographer to be hidden nearby to capture the moment. But all the photos show my mom's announcement overshadowing the proposal itself. I've thought about whether I'm overreacting. Maybe my mom really did just get caught up in the excitement and made a mistake. But the more I think about it, the more intentional it seems. She knew Alex was proposing. She saw him get down on one knee. She heard him start his speech. And she chose that exact moment to announce her own engagement. She could have waited literally 2 minutes for Alex to finish, but she didn't. She made a choice to insert herself into my moment, and now she's continuing to insert herself into my engagement and wedding planning. She expects us to coordinate everything so our weddings can complement each other. She talks about doing joint dress shopping and joint venue tours. She's even suggested that maybe we should have our receptions at the same location on consecutive weekends, so family doesn't have to travel twice. I love my mom, but this whole situation has really changed how I see her. I always knew she liked to be the center of attention, but I thought when it came to major life moments for her daughter, she'd be able to step back and let me have my time in the spotlight. Instead, she's found a way to make my engagement about her too. My friends have suggested I set firm boundaries with my mom about wedding planning. They've said I should make it clear that while I'm happy for her, my wedding planning is separate from hers, and I need space to focus on my own event. But every time I try to have that conversation, my mom gets emotional and says I'm pushing her away during a time when we should be closer than ever. I don't know how to navigate this. I want to have a good relationship with my mom. I want her to be involved in my wedding planning because she's my mom and that's traditional and important, but I also don't want her to take over everything and make it about her wedding too. I don't want to spend the next year of planning constantly comparing and coordinating and sharing what should be my special time, and I especially don't want to look back at my engagement and feel sad instead of happy. But that's what's happening. When I think about the proposal, I don't think about Alex's beautiful words, or the stunning view, or the excitement of starting our lives together. I think about my mom shouting about her own engagement and derailing the entire moment. That memory is now permanently tied to her interruption, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to separate the two. Alex has suggested that maybe we should just elope and avoid all the wedding drama entirely. Part of me wants to do that, but part of me is angry that my mom's behavior might push me into changing my plans. I've always wanted a real wedding with all my friends and family there. Why should I have to give that up because my mom can't respect boundaries? I guess what bothers me most is that my mom genuinely doesn't think she did anything wrong. She sees this as a beautiful bonding experience where mother and daughter are going through the same life milestone together. She doesn't understand that she stole something from me, that she took what should have been a perfect private moment between me and Alex and made it about her. And because she doesn't understand that, she's going to keep doing it. She's going to keep inserting herself and making everything about both of us instead of letting me have my own moments. So now I'm engaged, which should be purely exciting and happy, but it's complicated by resentment and frustration with my mom. And I have a feeling this is just the beginning, that the next year of wedding planning is going to be full of moments where my mom tries to make my wedding about her too. I just hope I can find a way to set boundaries without destroying my relationship with her, because despite everything, she's still my mom and I love her. I just wish she could love me enough to let me have my own moments without needing to share the spotlight. That's the end of that story. Your mom literally shouted about her own engagement in the middle of your boyfriend's proposal speech. Not before, not after, but during. And now, she's acting like it was this sweet coincidence when she very clearly hijacked your moment. The fact that she still doesn't see what she did wrong is mind-blowing. She had an entire weekend to tell you about her engagement. She could have told you at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, literally any time. But she chose to announce it in the exact middle of your proposal, and now every memory and photo from that moment includes her waving her ring around. That's not sharing in your happiness. That's stealing your thunder, because she couldn't stand not being the center of attention for 5 minutes. Our next story is about someone who discovered that sometimes family secrets are kept for terrible reasons. I found out my dad has another family he's been supporting for 20 years. I'm still processing this, and I need to get it out somewhere because my entire understanding of my family and my childhood has been turned upside down. 3 months ago, I discovered that my father has been living a double life for the past 20 years. He has another family, a whole other wife, and 2 kids that he's been supporting this entire time, and everyone in my extended family knew about it, except me and my siblings. I'm 28 years old. I have one older brother, who's 32, and one younger sister, who's 24. We grew up in what I thought was a normal, happy family. My parents seemed to have a solid marriage. My dad worked in sales, which meant he traveled a lot for work. He'd be gone for a week or 2 at a time, sometimes more, but that was just part of his job, or so we thought. My dad was a good father when he was home. He came to our school events, helped with homework, coached my brother's little league team. We had family dinners and went on vacations together. Sure, he was gone a lot for work, but when he was home, he was present. I never had any reason to suspect that anything was wrong. About 4 months ago, I was at a conference in a city about 3 hours from where I grew up. On the last day of the conference, I decided to explore the city a bit before heading home. I was walking through a nice neighborhood, looking at the architecture, when I saw someone who looked exactly like my dad getting out of a car in front of a house. I stopped and stared. It looked so much like him that I almost called out, but something made me hesitate. The man walked up to the front door of the house, and before he could open it, a woman came out and kissed him. Not a friendly peck, but a real kiss. Then 2 teenagers came out behind her, a boy and a girl, maybe 16 and 14. The man put his arms around all of them, and they went inside together. I stood there frozen. It couldn't be my dad. My dad was supposed to be on a work trip in a different state. But the resemblance was uncanny. I walked closer to the house and took note of the address. Then I looked at the car in the driveway. It was the same make and model as my dad's car, but I couldn't see the license plate from where I was standing. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Lots of people look similar. This was just some guy who happened to resemble my father, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When I got home that evening, my dad was there. He'd apparently gotten back from his work trip earlier that day. He seemed normal, asked about my conference, told us about his trip, but I kept thinking about the man I'd seen. The next day, I did something I'm not proud of. I looked through my dad's phone while he was in the shower. I know it was a violation of privacy, but I had to know if I was crazy or if something was really going on. What I found made my stomach drop. There were text messages between my dad and a woman named Linda. The messages were clearly romantic and familiar. They talked about everyday things like groceries and doctor's appointments, but they also had messages that said things like "miss you" and "love you." There were messages about the kids, and their school events and grades. These weren't messages between a man and his mistress. These were messages between 2 people who were living life together. I scrolled back through months of messages. There were discussions about bills and home repairs and family dinners. There were pictures of my dad with two teenagers I'd never seen before, the same teenagers I'd seen at that house. There were messages from my dad apologizing for having to leave to go back to his other obligations, and promises about when he'd be back. I felt like I was going to throw up. My dad wasn't just having an affair. He was living an entire separate life. He had another family. Those teenagers called him Dad in the messages. This woman, Linda, called him honey and sweetheart. They'd been together for at least as long as the message history went back, which was several years. I confronted my dad that night. I told him I'd seen him in that city and that I'd read his messages. At first, he tried to deny it, but when he realized I wasn't going to accept his lies, he broke down and admitted everything. He'd met Linda 22 years ago at a work conference. They'd had an affair, and she'd gotten pregnant. When she told him, he'd panicked. He didn't want to leave our family, but he also didn't want to abandon Linda and the baby. So he'd made the decision to support both families. He'd been splitting his time between us and them for over 2 decades. All those work trips weren't really work trips. Well, some of them were, but a lot of them were him going to stay with Linda and their kids. He'd set up a whole system where he'd work remotely some weeks and tell us he was traveling for work, but he was actually at Linda's house. He'd been paying her mortgage, contributing to bills, helping raise those kids, while also coming home to us and pretending everything was normal. I asked him if my mom knew. He said no, she didn't. She thought all his travel was work-related. I asked him how he'd gotten away with it for so long. He said it had been easier than he'd expected. He had a job that required a lot of travel, so no one questioned it when he was gone. He'd been careful about keeping the 2 lives separate. Linda knew about us. She knew he had another family, but we'd never known about her. I was devastated. My entire childhood was a lie. All those times my dad was away for work, he was actually with his other family. All those times he'd missed our events because of business trips. He'd probably been at their events instead. My mom had been living with a man who was married to someone else for 22 years and didn't even know it. I told my dad he had to tell Mom. I said if he didn't tell her within 24 hours, I would. He begged me not to say anything. He said it would destroy our family. I told him he'd already destroyed our family. We just didn't know it yet. My dad told my mom the next day. I don't even know how to describe that conversation. My mom's whole world collapsed. She'd been married to this man for 35 years, raised 3 kids with him, built a life with him, and it was all based on a lie. She was crying and screaming and asking how he could do this to her. My dad kept saying he was sorry, that he'd never meant to hurt anyone, that he'd just gotten trapped in the situation and didn't know how to get out. My mom kicked him out immediately. He went to stay at a hotel, and then I assume he went to Linda's house. My brother and sister were told what happened, and they were as shocked and devastated as I was. We all felt betrayed and lied to. Our whole understanding of our family was wrong. The worst part was finding out that our extended family had known. My dad's brother had known for years. My dad's parents had known. They'd all been keeping his secret, lying to us and to my mom for 2 decades. When we confronted them, they said they'd wanted to tell us, but my dad had made them promise not to. They said they'd hoped he would eventually leave Linda and come back to focus fully on our family, so they'd kept quiet to avoid causing unnecessary drama. Unnecessary drama. They'd watched my mom live a lie for 20 years, watched us grow up not knowing half of who our father was, and they'd called that avoiding unnecessary drama. I met Linda and my half-siblings about a month after everything came out. Linda wanted to talk to me, to explain her side of things. She said she'd fallen in love with my dad, and when she got pregnant, he'd promised he was going to leave my mom. He kept promising year after year that he'd tell us and make the transition, but he never did. Eventually, Linda had accepted that he was never going to fully leave our family, but she loved him and wanted him in her kids' lives, so she'd agreed to the arrangement. Her kids knew about us. They'd known their whole lives that their dad had another family. They'd grown up understanding that he'd be gone a lot because he was with his other kids. They'd celebrated their birthdays and holidays with him when he was available, but they'd learned early on that they couldn't expect him to always be there because he had responsibilities to us too. I felt bad for them in a way. They'd never had a full-time father. They'd always had to share him, and they'd known it. But I also felt angry because their existence had been a secret that had corrupted my entire childhood. My dad had been dividing his time, energy, money, and attention between two families, and that meant both families had gotten less of him than they deserved. My parents are getting divorced. My mom is obviously done with the marriage, and I don't blame her. My dad has been trying to maintain relationships with all of his children, but it's awkward and strained. My brother refuses to talk to him at all. My sister is trying to have a relationship, but it's hard for her. I'm somewhere in the middle, talking to him occasionally, but feeling hurt and betrayed every time we interact. My half-siblings reached out to me and my siblings on social media. They seem like decent kids who got stuck in an awful situation created by our dad. We've been talking a bit, trying to navigate this weird new relationship. It's strange to suddenly have siblings I never knew about. They have questions about our childhood and what our dad was like when he was with us. We have questions about what he was like with them. We're all trying to piece together who this man really was, because clearly none of us knew him as well as we thought. The financial implications have been messy too. My dad had been supporting two households for 20 years. My mom is now realizing that their retirement savings is much smaller than she'd expected because my dad had been sending significant money to Linda's family. The house we thought was fully paid off still has a mortgage because my dad had secretly refinanced it to help pay for Linda's house. My mom's entire financial future is less secure than she'd planned because my dad had been secretly supporting another family. My dad keeps apologizing and saying he never meant for any of this to happen. He says he made a mistake 22 years ago and then didn't know how to fix it. He says he loved both families and couldn't bear to choose between us. He wants us all to understand that he was trapped in an impossible situation. But the thing is, he wasn't trapped. He created that situation through his own choices, and then continued to choose it every single day for 20 years. He could have come clean at any point. He could have made a choice about which family he wanted to be with. Instead, he chose to lie to everyone and split himself in half, and now all of us, me, my siblings, my mom, Linda, and my half-siblings, are dealing with the aftermath of his selfishness. I don't know if I'll ever forgive him. I don't know if I can have a real relationship with him knowing that he's capable of lying so thoroughly for so long. Every memory I have of my childhood is now tainted by the knowledge that he was living a double life. Every family vacation, every holiday, every birthday, I now wonder if he was thinking about his other family, if he was wishing he was with them instead, if he was keeping track of what he was missing with them to make it up later. The man I thought was my dad doesn't exist. The man I actually have as a father is someone who could compartmentalize his life so completely that neither of his families knew the truth. That's not the kind of person I want in my life, but he's still my dad, and that's a complicated feeling to navigate. My mom is in therapy trying to process everything. My siblings and I are all in therapy too. Linda and her kids are apparently also in therapy. My dad destroyed multiple families with his choices, and we're all left trying to pick up the pieces and figure out who we are now that we know the truth. That's the end of that story. So your dad kept an entire second family secret for 22 years, had your grandparents and uncle all lying for him, and now wants everyone to feel sorry for him because he was trapped in a situation he created and actively maintained for 2 decades. The audacity to play the victim when he chose every single day to continue lying to everyone in both families. Your mom thought she was in a faithful marriage. You and your siblings thought you knew who your father was. Linda thought he'd eventually choose her. Your half-siblings grew up never having a full-time dad. Everyone suffered because your dad wanted to have everything without making any hard choices, and the family members, who knew and said nothing to avoid unnecessary drama, are just as bad. They let your mom waste 20 years of her life on a lie. Let's move to a story about someone whose roommate took advantage of kindness in the worst possible way. My roommate faked cancer for sympathy and money, and I helped her fundraise. I feel like such an idiot writing this, but I need to get it off my chest, because I'm still trying to process how I could have been so thoroughly deceived. My former roommate faked having cancer for over 6 months, and I was one of her biggest supporters. I helped her fundraise, drove her to appointments, organized meal trains, and defended her against people who were starting to question her story, and it was all a lie. I met Sarah when we were both looking for roommates 2 years ago. We found each other on a roommate finding app and decided to get a 2-bedroom apartment together. We weren't super close at first, just friendly roommates who got along well enough. We'd watch TV together sometimes, split groceries, normal roommate stuff. About 8 months ago, Sarah sat me down and told me she'd been diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. She was crying and scared, and she told me the doctors had found a lump and done a biopsy, and it had come back malignant. She said she'd have to start chemotherapy soon and would need surgery eventually. She asked if she could stay in the apartment during treatment or if I needed her to move out, since she might not be able to keep up with her share of the rent. I was horrified, and immediately told her that of course she could stay, and that I'd do whatever I could to help her through this. She was my roommate and my friend, and she was facing something terrifying. I couldn't imagine adding housing stress on top of a cancer diagnosis. Over the next few weeks, Sarah started treatment. She'd leave for the hospital early in the morning and come back exhausted in the afternoon. She'd spend days in bed, saying she felt terrible from the chemo. She started wearing hats and scarves because she said her hair was falling out. She showed me clumps of hair that had supposedly come out in the shower. She looked pale and tired all the time. I did everything I could to support her. I'd make her soup, do her laundry, clean the apartment so she wouldn't have to worry about it. I'd sit with her and watch movies when she felt up to it. I'd run errands for her because she said she was too weak and nauseous to go out. I drove her to several of her appointments and waited in the hospital parking lot for hours while she was supposedly receiving treatment. Sarah's story started spreading among our friend group. Everyone was devastated for her. She was only 26 years old and facing cancer. People wanted to help. One of our mutual friends suggested we set up a GoFundMe to help with medical expenses since Sarah didn't have great insurance. Sarah was hesitant at first, saying she didn't want charity, but eventually she agreed to let us set it up. I helped write the GoFundMe description. Sarah told me what to include about her diagnosis and treatment plan. We shared it on social media and with our extended friend network. The response was overwhelming. People donated thousands of dollars. Friends of friends who'd never even met Sarah donated. People left comments saying they were praying for her and sending positive energy. Within a month, we'd raised almost $30,000. Sarah was so grateful. She cried and thanked everyone for their generosity. She said the money would go toward her medical bills and living expenses while she couldn't work as much. She posted updates on the GoFundMe page about her treatment, talking about how hard chemo was, but how she was staying strong. But then things started to get weird. A few of our friends mentioned that they'd run into Sarah out at bars or restaurants during times when she'd said she was too sick to leave the house. Sarah always had explanations. She was having a good day. Her doctors encouraged her to try to live normally when she felt okay. The treatments came in cycles, so some days were better than others. One of our friends who's a nurse started asking questions about Sarah's treatment that Sarah seemed evasive about answering. What kind of chemo was she on? Which oncologist was she seeing? What was her prognosis? Sarah would give vague answers or change the subject, saying she didn't like to talk about the medical details because it was too depressing. I started noticing inconsistencies too, but I felt guilty for even thinking about them. Sarah would tell me she had a chemo appointment and I'd offer to drive her, but she'd say a friend was already taking her. Then that friend would mention later that they hadn't seen Sarah that day. When I'd ask Sarah about it, She'd say plans had changed last minute, or she'd gotten confused about which day the appointment was. Her hair wasn't really falling out either. She'd shown me those clumps in the beginning, but months into treatment, she still had a full head of hair under those hats and scarves. When I gently asked about it, she said she'd been using this special treatment that helped cancer patients keep their hair, and she was one of the lucky ones where it was working. The final straw came about 2 months ago. Another friend who works at the hospital where Sarah claimed to be receiving treatment happened to mention that she'd never seen Sarah there. She said she worked in the oncology department and would have recognized Sarah if she'd been coming in regularly. When I mentioned this to Sarah, she got really defensive and said that our friend must have just missed her, or that she saw different doctors on different days. But by this point, several of us were starting to compare notes. Nobody had ever actually gone into a hospital with Sarah. She'd always gone in alone. She'd never provided any documentation of her diagnosis or treatment. She hadn't lost weight despite supposedly being on chemo for months. She'd never looked genuinely sick, just tired sometimes, which could be explained by anything. A group of us decided to confront her. We sat her down and asked her directly to show us proof of her diagnosis, medical bills, appointment confirmations, anything. Sarah got upset and said she couldn't believe we were doubting her during the hardest time of her life. She said she felt betrayed that we'd question her when she was fighting for her survival, but we pushed harder. We told her that the inconsistencies were adding up, and that we needed proof. Eventually, after a lot of back and forth, Sarah broke down and admitted that she'd made the whole thing up. There was no cancer. There never had been. She'd lied about the diagnosis, the treatment, all of it. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I asked her why. Why would she do something like this? Her explanation was that she'd been struggling financially and emotionally, and when she'd mentioned offhand to someone that she wasn't feeling well, they'd been so caring and concerned that she'd just kept going with it. She said it had spiraled out of control, and she hadn't known how to stop without admitting what she'd done. The fundraising money, she'd spent it, some of it on actual bills, but a lot of it on shopping and going out and treating herself. She said she'd convinced herself that she deserved the money because she was struggling, even though she'd gotten it under false pretenses. I was furious. I felt used and stupid. I'd spent months taking care of her, driving her around, defending her against people who doubted her story. I'd helped her raise $30,000 by writing that GoFundMe description and sharing it with everyone I knew. I'd vouched for her authenticity, and it was all a lie. We reported Sarah to the police for fraud. She'd raised money under false pretenses, which is illegal. We also tried to contact everyone who donated to let them know what had happened and offer refunds, though most of the money was already gone. Sarah was evicted from our apartment immediately. Our landlord didn't want someone who'd committed fraud living there, and honestly, I couldn't have lived with her another day anyway. Sarah has since moved in with her parents in another state. She's facing legal charges for the fraud. The GoFundMe was shut down, and a report was filed with the platform. Some donors are trying to pursue her in small claims court to get their money back. Our entire friend group has cut her off completely, but the damage is done. People who donated money are out that money. I wasted months of my life taking care of someone who was manipulating me. Our friend group is fractured because some people knew her longer and are struggling with the revelation more than others. And I've lost the ability to trust people the way I used to. The thing that really gets me is how thoroughly she committed to the lie. She didn't just say she had cancer and leave it at that. She created an entire false narrative with fake symptoms, fake appointments, fake treatment side effects. She showed me fake clumps of hair. She spent days in bed pretending to be nauseous. She cried about being scared of dying. All of it was performance. I keep thinking about all the times I defended her when people questioned her story. There were people who were skeptical from the beginning, and I told them they were being cruel and unsupportive. I accused people of being heartless for doubting someone with cancer, and I was wrong. They were right to be skeptical, and I was too trusting. I also think about all the people who donated money in good faith, because they believed they were helping someone with cancer. Some of those people had their own cancer experiences or had lost loved ones to cancer. They gave money they might not have been able to afford because they wanted to help someone going through something they understood was terrible, and Sarah took advantage of that empathy and that trauma. The worst part is that Sarah's fake cancer story has made me cynical about real fundraisers now. When I see GoFundMe campaigns for medical expenses, I find myself wondering if they're legitimate or if someone else is pulling a similar scam. I hate that Sarah took my willingness to help people and twisted it into something that now makes me doubt everyone. I've been in therapy trying to process the betrayal. My therapist has helped me understand that what Sarah did is a recognized pattern of behavior, sometimes called Munchausen by internet or factitious disorder. People fake illnesses for attention, sympathy, or financial gain. It's a real thing that happens more often than people realize. That knowledge doesn't make me feel less stupid for falling for it, but it does help me understand that Sarah is deeply unwell in a different way. I don't know if Sarah will face serious consequences for what she did. Fraud cases can be hard to prosecute, especially if the money is already spent and she can't pay it back. But at minimum, her reputation is destroyed. Everyone who knows her knows what she did. She'll have to live with that for the rest of her life. As for me, I'm trying to rebuild my ability to trust people. I'm trying to forgive myself for being deceived. I'm trying to find a balance between being a caring person who helps others and being someone who asks appropriate questions and doesn't just accept everything at face value. It's a hard balance to find. I hope that if nothing else, this experience makes me more aware of red flags in the future. I hope I can eventually help people again without constantly wondering if they're lying to me, but right now, I'm still angry and hurt and embarrassed. I helped someone fake cancer, and I don't know if I'll ever feel okay about that. That's the end of that story. Your roommate faked cancer, complete with fake symptoms and fake hair loss, to get sympathy and money, and then played the victim when you asked for proof. She manipulated you into being her caretaker and her fundraising champion, and she did it so convincingly that you defended her against people who were rightfully skeptical. The amount of effort she put into maintaining that lie is actually disturbing. Most people would give up on the charade after a few weeks, but she kept it going for 6 months, showing you fake clumps of hair and spending days in bed pretending to be sick. And the fact that she took $30,000 from people who donated in good faith, many of whom probably had their own experiences with cancer, is absolutely disgusting. You're not stupid for believing her. She's a skilled manipulator who took advantage of your kindness. Let's talk about someone whose best friend crossed a line that destroyed their entire friendship. My best friend told my boss I was job hunting, and I got fired before I could quit. I lost my job, my best friend, and my financial stability all in 1 week, and I'm still trying to process how everything fell apart so quickly. My former best friend, who I'd trusted with everything, sabotaged my career out of jealousy, and now I'm dealing with the consequences of her betrayal. I'll call my ex-best friend Megan. We'd been friends since college, about 10 years. We were incredibly close, talked every day, knew everything about each other's lives. We'd been through breakups, family drama, job changes, everything together. She was the person I called when something good happened or when something bad happened. I trusted her completely. About a year ago, I started getting unhappy in my job. I was working for a mid-sized marketing company in a position that had initially been exciting, but had become stale and unfulfilling. My boss was micromanaging and critical. I wasn't learning anything new. The pay was okay, but not great. I'd been there for 4 years, and I was ready for a change. I started casually looking at job postings, just browsing to see what was out there. I wasn't in a huge hurry to leave because I had bills to pay, and I knew it could take months to find the right opportunity. I was being strategic about it, updating my resume, reaching out to my network, applying to positions that seemed like good fits. I told Megan about my job search because I told her everything. She knew I was unhappy at work and that I was looking for something new. She was supportive at first, helping me practice interview answers and look over my resume. She worked in a completely different field. She was a teacher, so it's not like we were competing for the same jobs or anything. After a few months of searching, I got an interview at a company I was really excited about. It was a step up in terms of role and responsibility, and the pay was significantly better. The interview went well, and they asked me back for a second round. I was thrilled and told Megan all about it. She seemed happy for me, or at least I thought she was. The second interview also went well, and the company indicated they'd be making a decision within a week or two. I was optimistic, but trying not to get my hopes up too much. I didn't tell my current employer anything because I didn't have an offer yet, and I didn't want to create awkwardness or put my current job at risk if things didn't work out. A few days after my second interview, my boss called me into her office. She closed the door and asked me to sit down. Then she told me that she'd heard I was job hunting and interviewing at other companies. I was shocked and asked where she'd heard that. She said someone had reached out to her directly to let her know. Out of concern for the company, my stomach dropped. I asked who had told her. She said she couldn't reveal her source, but that they'd been very specific about which companies I'd interviewed with and what roles I'd applied for. There were only a handful of people who knew those details. Basically, just my partner and Megan. My boss told me that the company had a policy about employees who were actively job hunting. She said that once they knew someone was looking to leave, they couldn't keep them on staff because it created uncertainty and the possibility of lost productivity. She said that this was nothing personal, but that she'd have to let me go effective immediately. I tried to explain that I was just exploring options and hadn't made any decisions yet. I told her I was a good employee and that my personal job search shouldn't affect my current work, but she was firm. She said the policy was clear and that she had to follow it. She had me pack up my desk that same day and had security escort me out of the building. I was devastated. I'd just lost my job without any notice, without any severance, without any backup plan. I didn't have an offer from the other company yet. I'd just interviewed. I had rent to pay and bills to cover, and now I had no income. I immediately called Megan, assuming she'd be supportive and help me figure out what to do next. But when I told her what happened, her reaction was weird. She didn't seem surprised. She asked a lot of questions about exactly what my boss had said and how she had found out. It felt like she was fishing for information rather than actually being concerned about me. That's when it clicked. I asked Megan directly if she'd told my boss about my job search. There was a long silence on the phone. Then she admitted that yes, she had. She said she had looked up my boss's email on LinkedIn and had sent her a message letting her know I was actively interviewing and planning to leave. I was so shocked I couldn't even speak for a moment. I finally asked her why she would do that. Why would she sabotage me like that? Her answer made me even more angry. Megan said that she'd been worried about me leaving my job. She said that my current position was stable and secure, and she thought I was making a mistake by looking for something else. She said she'd contacted my boss to force my hand and make me realize that my current job was actually good and I should stay. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her that she'd gotten me fired. I didn't get to realize my current job was good because I no longer had that job. She'd destroyed my employment and my financial stability because she'd decided she knew what was best for me better than I knew for myself. Megan started backtracking. She said she hadn't thought they'd actually fire me. She said she'd assumed my boss would just talk to me about it and maybe offer me a raise or a promotion to convince me to stay. She said she'd been trying to help me negotiate better conditions at my current job, not get me fired. I told her that was the stupidest logic I'd ever heard. What company keeps an employee after finding out they're actively job hunting? What boss offers a promotion to someone they know is trying to leave? Her plan, if that's even what it was, made absolutely no sense. Then Megan said something that made me realize what this was really about. She said that she'd been worried that if I got a new job, especially one that paid more and had more responsibility, I wouldn't have time for our friendship anymore. She said she'd seen it happen before, where people get new jobs and drift away from their old friends. She said she'd been scared of losing me, so she'd sabotaged my career to keep me close to her. She'd destroyed my livelihood because she was insecure about our friendship. She'd decided that her fear of me moving on was more important than my career growth, my financial stability, and my happiness. I told her our friendship was over. I told her that what she'd done was unforgivable and that I never wanted to speak to her again. She started crying and saying she was sorry and that she'd made a mistake, but I was done. I hung up on her and blocked her number. The next few weeks were a nightmare. I was unemployed with no severance and no real savings. I had to apply for unemployment benefits, which barely covered my rent. The company I'd been interviewing with did end up offering me the position, but they'd heard through the industry grapevine that I'd been terminated from my previous job, and they wanted to know why. When I explained the situation, they seemed skeptical. They ended up rescinding the offer, saying they'd decided to go with another candidate. I later found out through mutual contacts that my former boss had been contacted by the new company for a reference, and she'd told them that I'd been terminated for performance issues and disloyalty to the company. None of that was true. I'd been a good employee, and my termination had solely been because they found out I was job hunting, but that's what she told them. So not only did Megan get me fired, but the circumstances of my firing cost me the new job opportunity I'd been excited about. I spent 3 months unemployed. I applied to dozens of positions, but kept getting rejected or ghosted. The gap in my employment was a red flag to employers, and I struggled to explain why I'd left my last position without revealing the whole messy story. My savings ran out. I had to borrow money from my parents. I fell behind on credit card payments. The financial stress was overwhelming. I finally found a new position, but it was a lateral move, not the step up I'd been hoping for. The pay was about the same as my old job, maybe slightly less when you factored in benefits. I took it because I needed income and couldn't afford to be picky anymore, but I was bitter about it because I'd had an opportunity for something better, and Megan had destroyed it. Megan tried to reach out multiple times during those months. She sent emails, left voicemails, even showed up at my apartment once. She kept apologizing and saying she wanted to make things right. She offered to pay my rent for a few months, which felt insulting because what I'd lost was worth way more than a few months of rent. I'd lost career momentum, financial stability, and months of stress and uncertainty. I never responded to any of her attempts to reach out. As far as I was concerned, the friendship was dead. You don't betray someone like that and then get to come back with apologies and expect everything to be fine. She'd shown me that she was willing to destroy my life to serve her own interests, and I couldn't trust someone like that. Our mutual friends were split on the situation. Some of them thought I was being too harsh and that Megan had made a stupid mistake, but that she deserved forgiveness. They said that friendships require forgiveness and that she'd been there for me through a lot and I should give her another chance. Other friends understood why I'd cut her off and agreed that what she'd done was unforgivable. The friends who took Megan's side would say things like, "She was just trying to help," or "She didn't mean for you to get fired," or "She made a mistake out of love." But those explanations didn't change the reality of what happened. Her intentions might have been rooted in wanting to keep me close, but the action itself was a massive betrayal. She'd contacted my employer behind my back to reveal information I'd shared with her in confidence. That's not something you do to someone you love. I eventually had to cut off the friends who kept pushing me to forgive Megan because they were making the situation worse. They'd bring her up constantly, tell me how sorry she was, relay messages from her. It felt like they cared more about maintaining the friend group dynamic than about supporting me through a really difficult time. It's been about 8 months now since all of this happened. I'm still at the new job I took out of desperation. It's fine, but it's not what I wanted. I'm making less money than I should be at this stage in my career because I had to take what I could get. I'm still paying off the debt I accumulated during my unemployment. My career trajectory has been set back by at least a year, maybe more. I think about about what my life would look like if Megan hadn't betrayed me. I'd have taken that job I interviewed for. I'd be making significantly more money. I'd be in a role with more responsibility and learning new skills. I'd be happier and more fulfilled professionally. But instead, I'm stuck in a position that's basically where I was 4 years ago. And it's all because someone I trusted decided to interfere in my life in the most destructive way possible. The thing that makes me angriest is that Megan still doesn't seem to fully understand the magnitude of what she did. In her mind, she made a mistake that she's apologized for, and I'm being stubborn and unforgiving by not accepting her apology. But this isn't about holding a grudge over something petty. This is about the fact that she destroyed my career and my financial stability because she was insecure about our friendship. That's not a small mistake you apologize for and move past. That's a fundamental betrayal that changes everything. I've been in therapy, dealing with the trust issues this situation has created. I find it hard to open up to people now because I'm always worried about how they might use information against me. I'm more guarded and less willing to be vulnerable. Megan didn't just cost me a job and money. She cost me my ability to trust people the way I used to. Sometimes I wonder if I should have tried to sue her or pursue some kind of legal action, but my lawyer friends have told me it would be nearly impossible to prove damages directly caused by her actions, and it would be expensive and time-consuming to pursue. So I've had to accept that there won't be any real consequences for Megan beyond losing me as a friend, which she's already proven doesn't matter as much to her as her own interests. I hope that eventually I'll be able to rebuild my career to where it should have been. I hope I'll be able to trust people again. I hope the financial impact of those 3 months of unemployment will fade. But right now, I'm still dealing with the aftermath of my best friend's betrayal, and it's going to take a long time to fully recover from what she did to me. That's the end of that story. Your best friend really decided that her insecurity about potentially losing the friendship was more important than your entire career and financial stability, so she tanked your job and then acted surprised when it backfired. The mental gymnastics required to think that telling someone's boss their job hunting would result in anything other than termination is actually impressive. And then she tried to justify it by saying she was worried about losing you when her actions guaranteed she'd lose you anyway. You don't sabotage someone's livelihood because you're scared they might drift away. That's not friendship, that's possessive manipulation. And the fact that she still doesn't seem to understand why what she did was unforgivable shows that you made the right choice cutting her off. Our next story comes from someone whose in-laws decided that boundaries were more like suggestions. My in-laws used their emergency key to redecorate my house while we were on vacation. I'm still absolutely furious about this, and I need to vent because my husband keeps trying to convince me to let it go. My in-laws used the emergency key we gave them to enter our house while we were on vacation and completely redecorated multiple rooms because they didn't like our style. I came home to a house that barely looked like mine, and they expected us to be grateful. My husband and I have been married for 3 years. When we bought our first house about a year ago, his parents asked if they could have a spare key for emergencies. We thought that made sense. They live about 20 minutes away, and it seemed practical to have someone nearby with access in case there was a pipe burst or a break-in or something we needed to deal with while we were away. So we gave them a key with the explicit understanding that it was only for emergencies. For the first several months, everything was fine. They'd occasionally stop by if we were home to drop something off or say hi, but they always called first and respected our space. Then about 2 months ago, my husband and I decided to take a week-long vacation to Hawaii. It was going to be our first real vacation since buying the house, and we were really excited about it. Before we left, my mother-in-law asked if she and my father-in-law could stop by the house while we were gone to water the plants and check on things. We said that was fine, and appreciated them thinking of it. My husband mentioned that there were some plants in the living room and kitchen that would need watering, and his mom said she'd take care of it. We had an amazing vacation. Hawaii was beautiful. We relaxed and enjoyed each other's company, and for a whole week we didn't think about work or responsibilities or any of the stress of daily life. We were flying back on a Sunday evening, and we were tired but happy as we drove home from the airport. When we pulled into our driveway, I immediately noticed that the curtains in our living room window looked different. I mentioned it to my husband, and he said maybe it was just the lighting or angle, but when we walked through the front door, I knew something was very wrong. Our living room had been completely redecorated. The furniture was in different positions. There were new throw pillows on the couch that I'd never seen before. The artwork on the walls had been changed. There was a new rug on the floor. Even the coffee table was different. Our modern glass table had been replaced with a rustic wooden one. I stood there in shock, trying to understand what I was seeing. My husband walked further into the house and called out to me from the kitchen. I went in to find that the kitchen had also been changed. New curtains, new decorations on the walls, a new table runner, new canisters on the counter. It looked like someone else's kitchen. We ran upstairs and found that our bedroom had been redecorated too. New bedding, new lamps, new decorative items on the dresser. The guest room had also been changed. The only room that looked the same was the bathroom, and honestly, I was surprised they'd left that alone. I was on the verge of tears. This was our house, the first home we'd ever owned, and we'd spent months carefully choosing furniture and decorations to make it feel like ours, and someone had come in and changed it all without our permission. My first thought was that we'd been robbed, but it didn't make sense that robbers would replace our stuff with other stuff. Then my husband's phone rang. It was his mom, calling to ask if we'd gotten home safely and if we'd seen her surprise, she'd done this on purpose. My husband put her on speakerphone, and she was talking excitedly about how she and my father-in-law had been thinking about how young and inexperienced we were at decorating, and they'd decided to help us out by giving our house a more mature, sophisticated look. She said they'd spent the whole week while we were gone shopping for new items and redecorating. She said they'd been so excited to surprise us and couldn't wait to see our reactions. She kept saying things like, "You're going to love it," and "It looks so much better now," and "We really elevated your space." I grabbed the phone from my husband and asked her where all of our original furniture and decorations were. She said they'd donated most of it to Goodwill since we wouldn't need it anymore. Some of the nicer pieces they'd kept for themselves because they thought they could use them in their own house. She said it like she was doing us a favor by removing our outdated items. I was so angry I was shaking. I told her that she'd had absolutely no right to enter our house and change anything, let alone throw away our belongings. She seemed genuinely confused by my reaction. She said she'd been trying to do something nice for us, and she didn't understand why I was being so ungrateful. She said that they had spent thousands of dollars on the new items and dedicated an entire week to the project. My husband was trying to mediate, but I was done. I told his mom that I wanted every single original item back, and if she'd already donated or gotten rid of things, I wanted to be reimbursed for the value. She started getting defensive, saying that our old stuff wasn't worth anything and that the new items were much nicer. She said I was being ungrateful and that most daughters-in-law would be thrilled to have in-laws who cared enough to do something like this. I told her most daughters-in-law would be horrified to come home and find their house had been redecorated without permission. I said that what she had done wasn't a gift, it was a violation. My husband finally jumped in and told his mom that we needed time to process everything and we'd talk to her later. He hung up. We spent the next few hours going through the house, trying to figure out what was missing. My grandmother's quilt that had been on our bed was gone, donated, according to my mother-in-law. A painting I'd bought at a local art fair was gone. Several pieces of furniture we'd carefully chosen and saved up for were gone. Small decorative items I'd collected over years were gone. They'd thrown away things that had sentimental value and replaced them with generic stuff from Home Goods. My husband called his parents back and demanded they tell us which Goodwill they'd donated our items to. His mom said she couldn't remember they'd made several trips to different locations over the week. She said that even if she did remember, the items had probably been sold by now since it had been several days. She genuinely didn't seem to understand why we were so upset. Over the next few days, I managed to track down a few of our original items at various thrift stores, but most of it was gone. My grandmother's quilt was never found. The painting from the art fair was gone. Multiple pieces of furniture we'd bought together as a couple had been donated or were sitting in my in-laws' basement. When I demanded they return the items they'd kept for themselves, my mother-in-law said they'd already integrated them into their house and it would be a hassle to return them. She offered to pay us for the items instead, but the amount she offered was insultingly low, way less than what we had paid originally. My husband had to get firm with her and tell her that she either needed to return our belongings or pay fair market value for them. The whole situation caused a huge rift in the family. My mother-in-law felt attacked and unappreciated. She told other family members that she'd done something nice for us, and I'd been cruel and ungrateful in response. She said she'd spent her vacation week working hard to improve our house, and we'd repaid her kindness with anger and demands. My father-in-law tried to stay neutral at first, but eventually he sided with his wife. He said that maybe they should have asked first, but their hearts were in the right place, and we were overreacting by demanding everything back. He said that the new items were nicer than what we'd had, and we should just accept the upgrade and move on. Other family members had mixed reactions. Some of them thought what my in-laws did was completely inappropriate and understood why we were upset. Others thought we were being ungrateful and that we should appreciate the gesture, even if the execution was flawed. My husband's siblings didn't want to get involved, which felt like a cop-out because what his parents did was objectively wrong. We ended up demanding the emergency key back and changing our locks. My mother-in-law cried and said we were shutting her out of our lives. My husband told her that she'd violated our trust and our privacy and that she no longer had the privilege of having access to our home. She said we were being dramatic and punishing her for trying to help. The financial aspect has been messy too. We ended up having to basically rebuy a lot of the furniture and decorations we'd had originally. Some things we couldn't replace because they were one of a kind or had sentimental value. My grandmother's quilt is gone forever. The money we'd saved for other home improvements had to go toward replacing what my in-laws had thrown away. My mother-in-law did eventually pay us for some of the items she'd kept, but only after my husband threatened to take her to small claims court. She paid us the bare minimum and acted like she was being incredibly generous by doing so. She still maintains that she did nothing wrong and that we're being unreasonable. It's been 2 months since this happened, and my relationship with my in-laws is basically destroyed. We see them at family functions, but it's awkward and tense. My mother-in-law barely speaks to me because she thinks I turned her son against her. My father-in-law makes passive-aggressive comments about how some people can't accept help gracefully. My husband is caught in the middle. He agrees that what his parents did was wrong, but he also feels guilty about the estrangement from his family. He keeps suggesting that maybe we should try to work things out, maybe have a family therapy session to discuss boundaries. I've told him I'm willing to have a civil relationship with his parents, but I'll never fully trust them again, and they'll never have access to our house unsupervised. The worst part is that I don't feel at home in my own house anymore. We've replaced most of the items that were taken, but every time I walk into a room, I remember what it looked like when we first came home from vacation. I remember the violation of walking into our home and seeing someone else's aesthetic choices imposed on our space. It's gotten better with time, but there's still this feeling that our home was contaminated by their interference. My mother-in-law occasionally posts on social media about how hard it is when you try to help your children and they push you away. She never mentions what she actually did, just vague posts about being unappreciated and taken for granted. Family members who don't know the full story probably think we're being mean to her for no reason. I've tried to move past it, but it's hard. Every time I think about it, I get angry all over again. The entitlement of thinking you can enter someone someone's home and throw away their belongings because you don't like their taste. The lack of boundaries and respect. The expectation that we should be grateful for something we never asked for and didn't want. It's all so infuriating. My husband has apologized repeatedly for his parents' behavior. He's been supportive and has backed me up when his parents try to minimize what they did. But I know he's struggling with the family conflict, and I feel bad that his relationship with his parents has been damaged because of this. At the same time, I can't just pretend it didn't happen or that it wasn't a big deal. We've talked about what we'll do if we have kids someday. Will we let my in-laws babysit? Will we trust them to respect our parenting choices? If they thought it was okay to throw away our belongings and redecorate our house, what other boundaries will they feel entitled to cross? These are questions we're going to have to figure out, and honestly, I don't have good answers yet. For now, we're maintaining a distant but civil relationship with my in-laws. They're not allowed to have keys to our house. They have to call before coming over, and we've made it clear that unannounced visits won't be tolerated. We see them at holidays and family gatherings, but we keep things surface level. My mother-in-law continues to act like she's the victim in all of this, and I've stopped trying to convince her otherwise. I just hope that eventually this will all fade into the background and we can move forward. But right now, it's still raw, and I'm still angry about coming home from vacation to find that my in-laws had decided their decorating preferences were more important than our autonomy and our belongings. That's the end of that story. So your in-laws used an emergency key to break into your house while you were on vacation and threw away your belongings, including a quilt from your grandmother, because they didn't like your decorating style, and then they expected you to be grateful for this violation because they spent money on it. The fact that they donated your stuff to Goodwill without asking is bad enough, but keeping some of your furniture for themselves and then trying to lowball you when you asked for it back, that's theft. They literally stole your belongings under the guise of doing you a favor, and then played the victim when you were rightfully upset. Your mother-in-law crying about being shut out after she violated every possible boundary is peak manipulation. She's lucky you didn't actually press charges. Let's move to a story about someone whose sister-in-law decided to use their wedding as a platform for petty revenge. My sister-in-law wore a white dress to my wedding and announced her pregnancy during my toast. I got married 4 months ago, and I'm still processing the level of disrespect my sister-in-law showed me at my wedding. She wore white, announced her pregnancy during my thank you speech, and then acted like I was the problem for being upset about it. My husband's family is still pressuring me to apologize to her, and I'm losing my mind. Some background: my husband's sister, Rachel, has never liked me. From the moment we started dating, she made it clear that she thought I wasn't good enough for her brother. She'd make passive-aggressive comments about my job, my family, my appearance, anything she could think of. My husband would defend me, but it created tension in his family because Rachel was used to getting her way and didn't like being called out. When my husband and I got engaged, Rachel's behavior got worse. She made comments about how short our engagement was. We got engaged and married within 10 months, which she apparently thought was too fast. She questioned whether we were rushing into things. She made jokes about me probably being pregnant, and that's why we were hurrying. I wasn't pregnant, and even if I were, that wouldn't be her business. During the wedding planning process, Rachel kept trying to insert her opinions. She didn't like the venue we chose. She thought the color scheme was tacky. She said our registry had too many expensive items. Every decision we made, she had something negative to say about it. My husband eventually told her that if she had such a problem with our wedding, she didn't have to attend. She backed off a bit after that, but I could tell she was still bitter. The wedding day arrived, and I was so excited. We'd planned everything carefully, and it was going to be beautiful. I was getting ready with my bridesmaids when someone mentioned that Rachel had arrived and people were commenting on her dress. I didn't think much of it until I saw her during the pre-ceremony photos. Rachel was wearing a white dress, not off-white, not cream, not champagne pure white. It had lace details and was clearly a formal dress. It looked like a slightly less elaborate wedding dress. When I saw her, my first thought was that there must be some mistake. Nobody would actually wear white to someone else's wedding on purpose. I pulled my husband aside and asked him if he'd seen what his sister was wearing. He had, and he was furious. He'd already confronted her about it, and she'd said it was just a dress, and I was being a bridezilla for caring. She said that the rule about not wearing white to weddings was old-fashioned and outdated. She said if I was secure in my marriage, I wouldn't feel threatened by what she was wearing. My husband wanted to ask her to leave or change, but his parents begged him not to make a scene. They said Rachel was just being Rachel, and it was best to ignore her. They said that if we made a big deal about it, we'd be giving her the attention she wanted, and we'd look bad in front of the guests. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let it go. I didn't want to start my marriage with a huge family blowout. Throughout the ceremony and reception, Rachel made sure she was visible in photos. She positioned herself prominently in group shots. She found ways to be in the background of pictures of me and my husband. Every time I look at my wedding photos now, I see her in the background in her white dress, and it makes me so angry, but it gets worse. During the reception, I gave a thank you speech. I thanked our guests for coming, thanked our parents for their support, thanked the bridal party, the usual stuff. I was about 2 minutes into my speech when Rachel suddenly stood up from her table and shouted, "I'm pregnant!" The entire room went silent. Everyone turned to look at her. She was beaming and rubbing her stomach. She said she just couldn't keep the news in any longer, and she wanted to share her joy with everyone at the wedding. People started clapping and congratulating her. My speech was completely forgotten. I stood there at the microphone, unable to process what had just happened. My maid of honor came up and whispered, asking if I wanted to continue, but the moment was ruined. People were crowding around Rachel, hugging her, asking about the baby. My wedding reception had just become Rachel's pregnancy announcement party. My husband was livid. He marched over to Rachel and told her to leave. She started crying and said he was being cruel to his pregnant sister. His parents immediately sided with her, saying that we couldn't kick out a pregnant woman and that families should be celebrating together. They said Rachel was just excited and wanted to share her happiness, and we were being selfish by making it about us. I had to finish my speech to a room of people who were half listening because they were still buzzing about Rachel's news. The rest of the reception felt off. People kept coming up to congratulate us on our marriage, but then immediately ask about Rachel's pregnancy. How far along was she? When was she due? Was she hoping for a boy or a girl? My wedding became background noise to Rachel's announcement. After the wedding, multiple guests came up to me privately and said they couldn't believe what Rachel had done. They said wearing white was bad enough, but announcing a pregnancy during the bride speech was beyond inappropriate. But in the moment, most people had just gone along with it because they didn't know what else to do. My husband confronted Rachel the next day before we left for our honeymoon. He told her that what she'd done was disrespectful and hurtful, and he wanted to know why she'd done it. Rachel's answer was chilling. She said that I'd stolen her brother from her and ruined their family dynamic, so she wanted to ruin something of mine. She said my wedding was about celebrating a relationship she didn't approve of, so she'd made sure the focus wasn't entirely on me. She actually admitted it. She'd worn white on purpose. She'd waited until my speech to announce her pregnancy because she'd wanted maximum impact. She'd deliberately sabotaged my wedding as revenge for marrying her brother, and she didn't feel bad about it. She said I deserved it. My husband was devastated. He told Rachel that she was selfish and cruel, and that she'd damaged their relationship possibly beyond repair. Rachel started crying and called their parents, who immediately called my husband and told him he was being too harsh. They said Rachel was hormonal from the pregnancy and didn't mean what she'd said. They said families fight, but they always forgive each other, and my husband needed to let this go. My husband told them that unless Rachel apologized sincerely and acknowledged what she'd done wrong, he didn't want to have a relationship with her. His parents said he was being unreasonable and that he was choosing me over his family. They said that I was driving a wedge between their children and destroying their family. We went on our honeymoon, but it was hard to fully enjoy it, knowing what had happened. I kept thinking about my wedding and how what should have been the happiest day of my life had been. hijacked by my sister-in-law. I looked at the photos our photographer sent and felt angry every time I saw Rachel in her white dress in the background. When we got back from the honeymoon, the family drama continued. Rachel had apparently been telling everyone her version of events, where we'd been cruel to her for being excited about her pregnancy. She'd left out the part about wearing white on purpose and admitting she'd sabotaged the wedding deliberately. Family members who only heard her side were calling my husband and telling him he needed to apologize to his pregnant sister. My husband tried to explain what had really happened, but Rachel and her parents had already shaped the narrative. They said Rachel had worn an ivory dress, not white, and we'd overreacted. They said Rachel had been overwhelmed with emotion about her pregnancy and had blurted it out accidentally, and we'd been cruel by asking her to leave. They made us sound like the villains in the story. Some family members believed us, but others took Rachel's side. Extended family gatherings became uncomfortable. People would make pointed comments about forgiveness and family loyalty. Rachel would show up to events visibly pregnant, and people would fawn over her and ask about the baby, while completely ignoring the fact that we were newlyweds. My husband's parents kept pressuring him to reconcile with Rachel. They said that she was about to make them grandparents, and they wanted their children to be on good terms before the baby arrived. They said that my husband was going to regret missing out on his niece or nephew's early life because of pride and stubbornness. But my husband stood firm. He said that Rachel had deliberately hurt us on one of the most important days of our lives, had admitted it was intentional, and had shown no real remorse. He said he wasn't interested in a relationship with someone who was that vindictive and selfish, even if she was his sister. Rachel gave birth about a month ago. My husband's parents have been posting pictures of the baby constantly on social media, clearly trying to guilt my husband into reaching out. They'll post things like, "Baby's aunt and uncle haven't met her yet," with sad face emojis. It's emotional manipulation, and it's frustrating. I told my husband that I'd support whatever decision he made about his relationship with Rachel, but I personally wanted nothing to do with her. I said I'd go to family events if necessary, but I wouldn't pretend everything was fine. I said I wouldn't apologize for being upset that she wore white to my wedding and announced her pregnancy during my speech. My husband agreed. He said he might eventually try to have a relationship with his niece, but that would require Rachel to acknowledge what she'd done and apologize sincerely. Until that happens, he's keeping his distance. His parents are angry about it, but they've slowly started to realize that he's serious and not going to change his mind because they're pressuring him. The whole situation has left a bad taste in my mouth. My wedding day, which should be a happy memory, is now associated with Rachel's sabotage. Every time I look at my wedding photos, I see her white dress and remember her pregnancy announcement disrupting my speech. I can't think about my wedding without feeling angry and hurt. I've tried to move past it, but it's difficult, and my husband's family keeps bringing it up and trying to force a reconciliation. They act like I'm being petty for still being upset, but they weren't the ones who had their wedding hijacked. They weren't the ones standing at the microphone giving a thank you speech while their sister-in-law screamed about being pregnant. My friends have been supportive and have validated that what Rachel did was completely out of line. But my husband's family continues to act like I'm the problem. They say I'm holding a grudge and preventing my husband from having a relationship with his sister, but I'm not preventing anything. I told my husband I'd support him reconnecting with Rachel if that's what he wanted, but he's the one who's chosen not to because he recognizes that what she did was unforgivable and she hasn't shown any genuine remorse. So now we're in this weird limbo where we're estranged from Rachel and have a strained relationship with my husband's parents. Family events are uncomfortable. Holidays are tense. And all because Rachel decided that her dislike of me was more important than her relationship with her brother. I don't know if things will ever get better. Maybe Rachel will eventually realize what she lost and genuinely apologize. Maybe my husband will decide he wants to try to rebuild the relationship regardless. Or maybe this is just how things are going to be from now on. All I know is that my wedding day, which should be one of my happiest memories, has been permanently tainted by my sister-in-law's vindictiveness. and I'm still angry about it. That's the end of that story. Your sister-in-law literally admitted that she wore white and announced her pregnancy during your speech on purpose to sabotage your wedding, and your in-laws are still trying to make you apologize to her. She didn't accidentally wear ivory that happened to look white. She didn't get overwhelmed with emotion and blurt out her pregnancy news. She deliberately planned to ruin your day as revenge for you marrying her brother, and she succeeded. The fact that she's now playing the victim and acting like she's being persecuted while she's pregnant is classic manipulation, and your in-laws pressuring you to reconcile because there's a baby now, that's just rewarding her bad behavior. She doesn't get to sabotage your wedding and then demand a relationship because she had a kid. Let's move on to a story about someone who discovered their partner had been hiding a massive financial secret. My fiancé has been secretly supporting her ex-boyfriend for 3 years with our shared money. I found out 2 weeks ago that my fiancé has been sending money to her ex-boyfriend for the past 3 years. We have joint finances, meaning the money she's been sending him is money we both earned and saved together. I feel completely betrayed, and I don't know if I can move forward with the wedding. My fiancé, Emily, and I have been together for 4 years. We got engaged a year ago and have been planning a wedding for next summer. About 2 years ago, we decided to combine our finances. We both have jobs and contribute to a joint account that we use for rent, bills, savings, and general expenses. We each keep a small amount of personal spending money in separate accounts, but the vast majority of our money goes into the joint account. The financial arrangement has worked well, or so I thought. We've been saving for the wedding, for a down payment on a house, for our future together. Emily handles most of the actual bill paying and account management because she's more organized than I am, so I trusted that everything was being handled properly. 2 weeks ago, I was looking for some paperwork we needed for a loan application. Emily was at work, and she'd told me the documents were in her desk drawer. I was going through the drawer when I found a stack of bank statements for an account I didn't recognize. The account was in Emily's name only, so it wasn't our joint account or her personal spending account that I knew about. Curiosity got the better of me, and I looked at the statements. There were regular transfers out of our joint account into this secret account, usually about $500, $800 per month. Then there were transfers out of the secret account to someone named Josh, usually in similar amounts. This had been going on for years, based on the dates on the statements. I was confused and concerned. Was Emily hiding money from me? Was she planning to leave me? Was there some kind of financial issue she hadn't told me about? When she got home that evening, I confronted her with the bank statements and asked what was going on. Emily's face went pale. She sat down and admitted that she'd been sending money to her ex-boyfriend, Josh, for the past 3 years. She said he'd fallen on hard times after they broke up and had reached out to her for help. He'd lost his job, then his apartment, and had been struggling financially ever since. Emily had been helping him get back on his feet. I was stunned. She'd been sending our money we'd earned together and were supposed to be saving for our future to her ex-boyfriend for 3 years, and she'd never mentioned it once. I asked her why she hadn't told me, and she said she knew I'd be upset, and she didn't want to cause problems in our relationship. She said Josh needed the help, and she couldn't just abandon him. I tried to stay calm and asked more questions. How much money had she sent him total? Emily estimated it was probably around $25,000 over the 3 years. $25,000. That's money that should have gone toward our wedding, our future house, our savings. Instead, it had been going to her ex-boyfriend without my knowledge or consent. I asked Emily what Josh was doing with the money. She said he was using it for basic expenses, rent, food, transportation. She said he'd been trying to find work, but hadn't had much luck. I asked if he was disabled or had some reason he couldn't work, and she admitted that no, he was able-bodied and capable of working. He just hadn't found the right job yet. So basically, Emily had been funding her ex-boyfriend's life for 3 years while he supposedly looked for work, and she'd been doing it with money that was partially mine. I was furious. I asked her when this was supposed to end. Was she planning to support Josh forever? What about when we got married and bought a house? Was she going to keep sending him money then too? Emily started crying and said she'd been planning to phase out the support once Josh got back on his feet. She said she'd been meaning to tell me but never found the right time. She said she loved me and wanted to marry me, but she also felt responsible for Josh because they'd been together for 5 years, and she couldn't just cut him off when he needed help. I pointed out that Josh was her ex-boyfriend, not her responsibility. They'd been broken up for years before she and I even met. Whatever obligation she might have felt toward him should have ended when their relationship ended, and even if she did feel the need to help him, she should have discussed it with me before using our shared money to do it. Emily argued that the money came from her salary too, so she had a right to decide how it was spent. I reminded her that we'd agreed to combine our finances for shared goals, our wedding, our future home, our life together. Taking $25,000 out of that shared pool to give to an ex-boyfriend without discussing it wasn't just spending her own money, it was taking money from both of us. The argument went on for hours. Emily kept insisting that she'd been trying to help someone in need, and that I was being selfish for making it about money. I kept saying that this wasn't about the money itself. It was about the dishonesty and the betrayal. She'd been lying to me for 3 years, every month transferring money out of our account and hiding it from me. I eventually asked Emily to show me her correspondence with Josh. If this was really just about helping an old friend in need, I wanted to see the context. Emily was reluctant, but eventually showed me text messages between them. Reading through them made everything so much worse. Josh wasn't just some struggling ex that Emily was helping out of the goodness of her heart. The messages were flirty and intimate. Josh would thank Emily for the money and say things like, "I don't know what I'd do without you," and "You're the only one who's ever really cared about me." Emily would respond with messages like, "I'll always be here for you," and "I can't stand seeing you struggle." There were messages where Josh would complain about being lonely, and Emily would sympathize and say she missed their talks too. There were messages where Josh would talk about how he'd made a mistake letting Emily go, and how she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Emily never told him to stop, or that she was in a committed relationship with me. When I confronted Emily about the tone of the messages, she swore nothing physical had happened between them. She said they were just friends, and she was being supportive, but the messages showed clearly that Josh still had feelings for Emily, and Emily was encouraging those feelings by responding warmly and continuing to send him money. I asked Emily if she'd been in contact with Josh throughout our entire relationship. She admitted that yes, they'd never really stopped talking after they broke up. She said they'd remained friends, and that she didn't think it was a big deal. I asked if she'd ever mentioned to Josh that she was engaged, and she admitted that she'd told him we were together, but had downplayed how serious it was. So not only had Emily been sending our money to her ex-boyfriend, but she'd been maintaining what looked like an emotional affair with him for our entire relationship. She'd been keeping in regular contact with him, sending him intimate messages, and hiding our engagement from him so he wouldn't feel bad. I was devastated. The woman I was planning to marry had been lying to me for years about money, about her ex, about her ongoing relationship with him. I felt like I didn't even know who she was. The Emily I thought I knew wouldn't have been capable of this level of deception. Emily kept insisting that she loved me and wanted to marry me. She said Josh was just a friend she was helping, and that the messages sounded worse than they were. She said if I would just forgive her and move past this, she'd cut off contact with Josh and stop sending him money. But I didn't know if I could trust her word anymore. She'd been promising to phase out the support for 3 years apparently, and it had never happened. I told Emily I needed time to think. I moved out temporarily and went to stay with a friend. That was 2 weeks ago, and I still haven't decided what I'm going to do. Emily has been calling and texting constantly, apologizing and begging for another chance. She said she'll do anything to make this right: therapy, full transparency with finances, cutting off Josh completely, whatever I need. But I keep thinking about the past 3 years and how she lied to my face every single month when she transferred money out of our account. I think about how she maintained an intimate emotional relationship with her ex while planning a wedding with me. I think about the $25,000 that could have gone toward our future, but instead went to support a man she used to sleep with. My friends and family are split on what I should do. Some people think I should leave Emily immediately. They say that this level of deception shows a fundamental lack of respect and honesty, and that if I marry her, I'll always wonder what else she's hiding. Other people think I should go to couples therapy and try to work through it. They say that 4 years is a long relationship to throw away over a mistake, even a big one, and that if Emily is genuinely remorseful and willing to change, maybe the relationship can be saved. I've been looking at our finances to see how much this has actually cost us. If Emily hadn't been sending that $500, $800 per month to Josh, we'd have about $25,000 more in savings right now. That's enough for a down payment on a house in our area. That's enough to fully fund our wedding with money left over. Instead, that money is gone, given to a man who apparently has just been coasting on my fiance's support, instead of getting his life together. I reached out to a friend of mine who knows Josh's situation to get an outside perspective. My friend told me that Josh does actually have a job now, has had one for about 6 months. So not only has Emily been supporting Josh unnecessarily, but she's been continuing to send him money even after he started earning his own income again. When I confronted Emily about this, she admitted she'd known Josh had found work, but said he was still struggling and needed the help. More lies. The wedding is supposed to be in 8 months. We've already put deposits down on the venue, the caterer, the photographer. My family has started buying plane tickets. Emily's family is excited about the wedding and has been asking about details. Nobody except my close friends and family knows about this situation. Emily has been acting like everything is fine and continuing to post happy couple photos on social media. I'm torn because I do love Emily, or at least I love the person I thought she was. We've built a life together over the past 4 years. We have shared friends, shared experiences, shared dreams. The idea of throwing all of that away is painful, but I also don't know if I can marry someone who lied to me so thoroughly for so long. Trust is fundamental to a marriage, and I don't trust her anymore. Emily has cut off contact with Josh, or so she says. She's shown me her phone to prove she's blocked his number and deleted his messages. She's given me full access to all of her accounts and passwords. She's suggested we go to couples therapy. She's written me long letters apologizing and explaining her actions. She's done everything I've asked her to do, but I keep coming back to the fact that she only did these things after she got caught. She only stopped supporting Josh because I found out. She only became transparent about her finances because I discovered the secret account. If I hadn't found those bank statements, how much longer would this have gone on? Another year? Another 5 years? Would she still be sending money to Josh after we were married? I've also been thinking about Josh's role in all of this. He's a grown man who's been accepting money from his ex-girlfriend for 3 years, while knowing she was in a new relationship. What kind of person does that? If he really cared about Emily, he would have refused the money and figured out how to support himself. Instead, he's been manipulating her and taking advantage of her guilt about their past relationship. Emily has said that Josh manipulated her emotionally, and I do think there's some truth to that. From the messages I saw, Josh definitely knew how to play on Emily's emotions and guilt, but Emily is an adult who made choices every single month to transfer money to him and to maintain their relationship. She's not blameless just because Josh was manipulative. I don't know what I'm going to do. Part of me wants to call off the wedding and end the relationship. Part of me wants to try therapy and see if we can rebuild trust. Part of me is just exhausted and confused and wishes this had never happened. All I know is that my relationship, which I thought was solid and heading toward a happy future, has been revealed to have a massive foundation of lies and betrayal, and I'm not sure it can be repaired. That's the end of that story. Your fiancé spent $25,000 of your shared money on her ex-boyfriend over 3 years, and maintained what sounds like an emotional affair with him the entire time, all while planning a wedding with you. She only stopped when you found the bank statements she was hiding, which means she was planning to continue this indefinitely. The fact that she knew Josh had a job for 6 months and kept sending him money anyway shows this was never really about helping someone in need. It was about maintaining a connection with her ex-boyfriend while using your shared resources to do it. And now she's doing all the right things: therapy, transparency, cutting contact, but only because she got caught, not because she decided on her own that what she was doing was wrong. That's not genuine change, that's damage control.